Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was teleported in Black Clover with 6 Clover Grimoire and Got Harem? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. A whirlwind in a world of clover. The world dissolved into a scream of tearing paper. One moment, Naruto was a sun, a blazing golden star of chakra roaring towards Kagaya Otsutsuki. The next, he was nothing. A stray thought caught in a maelstrom of non-existence. The force of his 6 paths, ultra-big ball Recentrican colliding with her expansive truth-seeking orb had not just leveled the landscape of their final battlefield. It had ripped a hole in reality itself. He felt a sensation like being turned inside out. Colors that had no names bled into sounds that made no sense. His connection to Kurama, the fiery, constant presence in his gut for his entire life, flickered like a dying candle. He reached for it, a desperate, silent plea, but his fingers met only emptiness. The golden cloak of Nine Tails Sage Mode was stripped from him, followed by the ethereal shroud of the 6 Paths Sage Mode. He was just Naruto again, tumbling through an impossible void. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to find purchase. But he was too exhausted to feed it. He had poured everything, every last drop of chakra, every scrap of wool, into that final attack. There was nothing left but a bone-deep weariness, the fading echo of Sakura's cry and Sasuke's grim silence. Did we win? The thought was a wisp of smoke, quickly torn apart by the howling chaos. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. The void spat him out. His senses returned with a violent rush. The smell of damp earth and sweet, cloying blossoms filled his nose. The sound of a gentle breeze rustling through impossibly tall trees reached his ears. He felt gravity's embrace once more, a brutal, unforgiving yank that pulled him down. He crashed through a canopy of thick green leaves, the branches whipping at his tattered orange and black jacket. His descent was slowed, but not stopped. He hit the ground with a rib-jarring thud that knocked the last of the air from his lungs. For a long moment, he just lay there, face down in the soft loam. His world a dizzying swirl of green and brown. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself onto his hands and knees. His head swam. A wave of nausea rolled through him. He took a deep, shuddering breath, and the air itself felt different. Thicker. It vibrated with an energy he had never felt before. It wasn't chakra, not exactly. It was wilder, more chaotic, yet it saturated everything, the air, the trees, the very soil beneath his fingertips. It was like the natural energy he had learned to gather on Mount Myoboku, but it was everywhere, humming like an invisible orchestra. He staggered to his feet, using a massive, rough-barked tree for support. He took stock of his situation. He was alone. His clothes were shredded, and his body was a canvas of bruises and cuts, but nothing seemed to be broken. The gaping wound in his chest from Kagaya's attack was gone, sealed by the last vestiges of his regenerative abilities. But the power that had fueled that healing was gone now, too. He was running on empty. He looked around, his shinobi senses kicking in. He was in a forest, dense and ancient. The trees were larger than any he had seen outside of the Forest of Death, their trunks thick as small houses. Sunlight dappled through the high leaves, painting the forest floor in shifting patterns of light and shadow. In the distance, silhouetted against the bright blue sky, was an impossible sight, a colossal skull. Larger than the Hokage mountain, with a single, massive horn jutting towards the heavens. "Where am I?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. This wasn't his world. The realization settled not with a crash, but with a quiet, hollow certainty. He had been thrown somewhere else, somewhere new. A wave of profound loss washed over him, for his friends, for his home, for the victory he hadn't been able to see. He clenched his fists, his knuckles white. This wasn't the time for grief. He was alive. He was a survivor. The first rule of being a shinobi was to adapt. He closed his eyes, forcing himself to calm down. To feel. He tried to draw on his chakra reserves, the familiar wellspring of power within him. He found something else. His internal coils, the pathways of his chakra network, were still there. But they were interfacing with the buzzing energy of this new world. The wild energy, This, mana, was being drawn into him, merging with the dregs of his own chakra. It felt strange, like pouring water into a container of oil and watching it forcibly combine. The fusion was creating something new, a hybrid energy that felt both alien and incredibly potent. A sudden commotion from beyond the trees snapped him out of his introspection. Voices. Young ones. He moved with the ingrained silence of a seasoned warrior, flitting through the undergrowth until he reached the edge of the forest. He peered out from behind a thick bush. He saw a clearing, and in its center, a towering tower. It was a bizarre structure, a multi-tiered spire that seemed to be made of ancient, weathered stone. At its base, a crowd of people was gathered, mostly teenagers. They were all chattering excitedly, their gazes fixed on the top of the tower. Naruto's eyes narrowed. He couldn't understand their language. But the emotions were universal. Anticipation, nervousness, hope. His gaze swept over the crowd, analyzing. Most of the youths wore simple, peasant-like clothing. A few, however, were dressed in finer, more ornate robes, their expressions a mixture of arrogance and boredom. Standing slightly apart from the main group were two boys who immediately caught his attention. One was short, with ash blonde hair and a boisterous, almost frantic energy. He was practically vibrating with excitement, his muscles coiled like a spring. He wore a simple tunic and a headband. The other was tall, with black hair and a calm, almost unnervingly composed demeanor. He radiated an aura of quiet confidence that set him apart from everyone else. Naruto recognized the dynamic instantly. Rivals. It reminded him, with a painful pang, of himself and Sasuke. An older man, robed and carrying a staff, stepped forward and began to speak. The crowd fell silent. Naruto focused, trying to parse the words. But it was just a stream of unintelligible sounds. Then, something incredible happened. The tower began to glow. Shelves, previously empty, suddenly filled with books of all shapes and sizes, each one bathed in a soft, ethereal light. The books began to float down from the shelves, one by one, and fly towards the outstretched hands of the teenagers. Each youth who received a book, a grimoire, his instincts whispered, erupted in cheers. Most of the grimoires were thin, with a simple, three-leaf clover insignia on the cover. Then, a brilliant golden light emanated from the tower. It was far brighter than the others. A thick, ornate grimoire, glowing with an immense power that made the air crackle, descended slowly. It floated towards the tall, black-haired boy. A gasp went through T. He crowed as they saw the cover, a four-leaf clover. A four-leaf. The words were spoken in a tone of awe. Naruto didn't need to understand the language to know that this was something special. The short, ash-blonde boy stared, his jaw slack with disbelief, before a look of fierce determination crossed his face. He held his own empty hands out, waiting. But no grimoire came. The old man looked at him with something akin to pity. The arrogant nobles began to snicker. The boy's hopeful expression crumpled. Naruto felt a familiar pang of sympathy. He knew what it was like to be the outcast, the one left behind. But the ceremony wasn't over. As the last of the grimoires settled, a new light began to shine from the very pinnacle of the tower. It wasn't the gentle glow of the others. This was a blinding, ferocious radiance. A mixture of pure gold and deep, swirling crimson. It was a light of immense, untamed power, a power that resonated with the newly forged energy churning inside Naruto. The air grew heavy, thick with pressure. The chattering crowd fell into a stunned silence. Everyone, from the old man to the arrogant nobles to the two rivals, stared up in a mixture of terror and awe. The light was so intense it felt like a physical weight, pressing down on them, demanding their attention. Deep within the tower, something ancient and forgotten had awakened. It had slumbered for centuries, waiting for a vessel that could contain its power, a soul that could comprehend its purpose. It had felt the arrival of the outsider, the being whose very existence was a paradox of two worlds, of chakra and mana. It had found its partner. With a sound like a thunderclap, a single book shot down from the tower's peak. It was not a gentle descent. It was a meteor, a streak of crimson and gold that blazed through the air. It was bound in dark, worn leather, but the insignia on the cover was what held everyone's gaze, what made their hearts stop in their chests. It was a clover, but its leaves were not 3, nor 4. It had 6 leaves, the crimson of the 6th leaf so dark it was almost black, seeming to drink the very light around it. The grimoire didn't fly towards the clearing. It shot past the tower, over the heads of the stunned crowd, and hurtled directly towards the forest's edge. Directly towards Naruto. He had no time to react. He instinctively threw up his arms to shield his face. The grimoire didn't hit him. It stopped abruptly, inches from his nose, hovering in the air. It pulsed with a power that felt like a living thing, a wild, ancient heartbeat that echoed the rhythm of his own soul. He could feel it, a wordless communication flowing from the book into his mind. It was a feeling of acceptance, of recognition, of choosing. Slowly, he reached out a hand. The moment his fingers brushed the worn leather cover, a torrent of energy, raw and overwhelming, flooded into him. It was not the gentle hum of the world's mana, it was something far older, far more potent. It was the distilled essence of a forgotten age, and it settled into his newly formed energy system as if it were finally coming home. The grimoire pulsed once, a brilliant flash of crimson light, and then settled gently into his hands. He stared at it, his mind reeling. A 6-leaf clover. What did that even mean? He didn't have time to ponder the question. The commotion from the clearing had turned into panicked shouts. He looked up to see a new figure had appeared. A man wrapped in chains, with a greasy leer and a grimoire of his own that radiated a slimy, unpleasant energy. Chains shot out, wrapping around the black-haired boy, who was too stunned by the grimoire's appearance to react. The man cackled, snatching the 4-leaf grimoire from the boy's paralyzed grasp. A 4-leaf clover. My, what a prize. The chain mage sneered in his foreign tongue. I was just going to wait for you in the shadows, but that light show, it's made everyone jittery. Better to just take it now. The ash-blonde boy, who had been frozen in place, suddenly roared and charged forward. Get your hands off him, you thief. Asta. No. The black-haired boy, choked out. The chain mage, Revchi, laughed. And what are you going to do about it, you magic-less runt? He sent a flurry of chains whipping towards Asta. Naruto didn't hesitate. He didn't know these people. He didn't know their world or their rules. But he knew a bully when he saw one. He knew the look of a friend trying to protect another. And he knew injustice. He moved. He wasn't the golden flash he had been in the war. He was something different now. He pushed off the ground, and the raw, untamed power in his veins responded. He didn't just run. He exploded forward, a blur of motion that left a gust of wind in his wake. Revchi's eyes widened as the orange-clad stranger appeared between him and Asta. Who the hell are you? Naruto didn't answer. He didn't need to. He held out his right hand, palm up. The hybrid energy, that swirling mix of chakra and mana, roared to life at his command. It was instinct, muscle memory refined over 1,000 battles. He gathered the energy, compressed it, and gave it form. A swirling sphere of violent, blue-white energy appeared in his palm, grinding and churning with a sound like 1,000 angry hornets. It wasn't a perfect Rasengan. It was wilder, more unstable, flecked the crimson energy of the grimoire now tucked into the back of his belt. But it was more than enough. What is that spell? Revchi shrieked, a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes. He sent a wall of chains to intercept. Naruto met them head-on. He didn't try to dodge or weave. He simply pushed the unstable sphere forward. Rasengan, he yelled, the name of his signature technique a familiar comfort in this strange new world. The moment the sphere touched the chains, it was not a contest. It was an annihilation. The magical chains, which had seemed so formidable moments before, shattered like glass. The Rasengan didn't slow. It plowed through the cascading shards and slammed into Revchi's chest. The impact was devastating. The chain mage's eyes bulged, and a strangled cry died in his throat. He was thrown backward like a ragdoll, smashing through the stone wall of a nearby ruin before collapsing in a broken, unconscious heap. The stolen 4-leaf grimoire clattered to the ground. Silence. Asta stood frozen, his mouth agape, staring at the utter devastation. Now free of the chains, looked at Naruto with wide, calculating eyes. The fear that had gripped him moments before was replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated shock and intrigue. This stranger had appeared from nowhere, wielding a power unlike anything he had ever seen, and had effortlessly defeated a mage who had completely incapacitated him. Naruto stood over the fallen mage, his hand still tingling from the raw power. He glanced down at the swirling sphere as it dissipated. It was strong, stronger than he expected. This new world, this new energy, it had potential. He turned his attention to the two boys. He couldn't speak their language, but a smile was universal. He offered them a small, reassuring grin. He then walked over, picked up the four-leaf grimoire, and tossed it to Yuno, who caught it automatically. Naruto then looked towards Asta, who was still staring at him with hero worship in his eyes. He gave the shorter boy a thumbs up. He could feel other people approaching, the local authorities from the ceremony, their magical signatures a mixture of caution and alarm. He had no desire to be interrogated. He needed to learn, to understand, to get his bearings. He looked at the two boys one last time, then back at his own grimoire, the mysterious six-leaf tome that hummed with a power that felt both ancient and limitless. He focused on the image of the robed man from the tower, on the way his mouth formed words. He brought a single shadow clone into existence beside him, a simple, low-cost jutsu that felt surprisingly easy with this new energy. The clone nodded, transformed into a perfect replica of one of the local youths, and spoke in the strange tongue, its voice a perfect mimicry. "I mean no harm," the clone said, parroting a phrase Naruto had heard from the crowd. The simple act of communication, of showing he was not a mindless beast, was enough to make the approaching mages pause. While they were distracted, the real Naruto turned and melted back into the shadows of the forest. The royal capital. He'd heard the name spoken with reverence. That seemed like a good place to start. A place to find answers. A place to get stronger. He placed a hand on the six-leaf grimoire at his back. It felt warm to the touch, a silent promise of the power and secrets it held. He was alone, lost, and in a world that was not his own. But for the first time since he'd arrived, he felt a spark of something familiar, something that had defined his entire life, the thrill of a new adventure. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Crimson Lioness and the Whispering Woods. The world had a pulse. Naruto felt it with every step, a constant, rhythmic thrum of energy that vibrated up from the soles of his worn sandals and into his very bones. It was the mana, the lifeblood of this new reality, and it was as different from the chakra of his homeland as the ocean is from a river. Chakra was a part of him, an internal wellspring he could draw upon. This mana was external, an infinite sea that he had to learn to swim in. For 3 days, he had walked. He followed the sun, heading in the general direction he believed the royal capital to be, using the vague memory of a signpost he'd glimpsed near Hage. The forest was dense and untamed, a sprawling wilderness that seemed to stretch on forever. It was quiet, but it was a living quiet, filled with the rustle of unseen creatures and the whisper of wind through leaves the size of dinner plates. He was healing. The deep, soul-crushing exhaustion from the war was receding, replaced by a slow-burning fire fueled by this world's abundant energy. His own chakra reserves were still dangerously low, a mere puddle compared to the lake they once were. But the puddle was being steadily refilled, not with pure chakra, but with the strange, potent hybrid he had forged in his first moments here. His grimoire was a silent companion, strapped securely to his back. It felt warm against his skin, a constant, reassuring weight. He had tried to understand it, spending hours poring over its thick, vellum-like pages. They were blank, all of them, yet he knew, with an unshakable certainty, that it was not empty. The power thrumming within its dark leather cover was immense, a sleeping leviathan. It wasn't a book of spells to be read, it was a conduit. An amplifier waiting for him to provide the spark. His Rasengan in the clearing had been proof of that. He hadn't read a spell, he had simply performed the technique he knew by heart. The grimoire had responded, taking his intent and his chakra, drawing in the ambient mana, and magnifying the result tenfold. The result was a technique that was wilder, more volatile, but undeniably more powerful than its purely chakra-based counterpart. He stopped in a small, sun-dappled glade, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and unknown flowers. It was time to practice. He couldn't afford to be weak in a world he didn't understand. "All right, let's try something smaller," he muttered to himself, the sound of his own voice a strange comfort in the vast silence. He held out his hand and focused, molding his new energy. He thought of the simple transformation jutsu, the first technique he had ever truly mastered. He imagined the feel of bark, the shape of leaves. A puff of smoke, far denser and more vibrant than he was used to, erupted in his palm. When it cleared, he was holding a perfect, impossibly detailed wooden bird. It wasn't a mere illusion, it was solid, real. He could feel the grain of the wood under his fingertips. He tossed it into the air, and with a flick of his will, it flapped its wings and took flight, circling the glade before dissolving back into a cloud of shimmering red and gold particles. The colors of the six-leaf clover. He grinned. This was new. This was interesting. He moved on to his most trusted technique, the shadow clone jutsu. He brought his fingers together in the familiar cross-seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. There was a series of loud pops, like a string of firecrackers going off. Where he had intended to make 1 or 2 clones for practice, a dozen now stood around him. Looking just as surprised as he was. They were more solid, more defined. They didn't have the slightly ethereal shimmer his chakra clones sometimes did. They looked, for all intents and purposes, like 12 perfect copies of himself. Whoa, one of the clones breathed, looking at its hands. I feel different, stronger, another added, punching the air. The movement was crisp, powerful. Naruto dismissed them, and the rush of information and energy that returned to him was staggering. It was far more potent than what he was used to. The clones were not just hollow copies. They were retaining a significant portion of the mana they absorbed from the atmosphere. He could use this. In a prolonged fight, he could cycle clones in and out, constantly refreshing his energy and gathering information. The strategic possibilities were endless. A sudden, distant sound shattered his concentration. A scream. It was sharp, laced with fear, and cut short. It was followed by the unmistakable clash of a battle, the explosive roar of what he now recognized as magic, and the guttural yells of men. His head snapped up, his blue eyes instantly hardening. His training took over. In one fluid motion, he was moving, a silent orange blur darting through the trees, leaping from branch to branch with an agility that felt as natural as breathing. The sounds of conflict grew louder, guiding him. He broke through the tree line and dropped into a crouch behind a thicket of ferns overlooking a dirt road. The scene below was one of chaos. A lavish carriage, its dead panels splintered and its door torn from its hinges, was stopped in the middle of the road. A dozen or so rough-looking men, bandits by their ragged appearance and cruel sneers, surrounded it. They were magic users, flinging crude projectiles of rock and wind at their lone opponent. And what an opponent she was. A young woman stood between the bandits and the carriage, a whirlwind of fiery defiance. She had wild, untamed vermilion hair that seemed to burn in the sunlight and eyes the color of molten gold. She was dressed in simple, practical traveling clothes that did little to conceal the powerful, corded muscle of a warrior. She moved with a ferocious grace, her fists wreathed in roaring flames. She wasn't casting spells from a distance, she was in the thick of it, a brawler, her Uri punch and kick unleashing devastating blasts of fire magic. She was magnificent, and she was in trouble. For every 2 bandits she knocked aside with a wave of fire, 3 more would press the attack. Their leader, a tall, wiry man with a grimoire that floated open at his side, was keeping his distance. His magic was more subtle, more insidious. He wasn't attacking her directly. Instead, he was manipulating the very ground beneath her feet. Patches of earth would turn to thick, grasping mud, slowing her movements, throwing her off balance. Roots would snake up from the ground to try and ensnare her ankles. He was a spider, patiently weaving a web around a furious lioness. Just give it up, little noble. The leader taunted, his voice a grating rasp. Your fancy mana will run out eventually. Lord knows you're wasting enough of it. Then you, and that pretty little trinket on your neck, will be ours. The woman responded with a guttural roar, unleashing a massive plume of fire that forced the bandits back. Their clothes singed and their faces etched with fear. You dare lay your filthy hands on a royal knight of the Clover Kingdom? I will burn you all to ash. Naruto didn't understand the words, but the intent was crystal clear. She was fierce, proud, and completely outmatched. He respected her spirit. It reminded him of his own, of that refusal to ever give in, no matter the odds. He wasn't one to stand by and watch someone like that get overwhelmed. He decided to make an entrance. He created a single shadow clone, keeping it hidden in the trees with him. Then, he focused, gathering the chaotic energy in his palm, shaping it. The wild, unstable Rasengan from Hage was too much, too flashy. He needed precision. He calmed his mind, remembering Jiraiya's lessons, the endless hours of practice. He compressed the sphere, forcing it into a more stable, more controlled form. It was still flecked with crimson energy from the grimoire, but it hummed with a steady, lethal power. "Ready?" he asked his clone. The clone grinned. "Always." The bandit leader chose that moment to spring his trap. Now, binding mud coffin. The entire ground around the fiery woman turned into a churning morass of thick, heavy mud. It surged upwards, wrapping around her legs, her waist, her arms, pulling her down. Her flames sputtered as the magical mud smothered them. She struggled, her muscles straining. But the mud was relentless, infused with the bandit leader's magic. "Got you," he cackled, taking a step forward. "Now, let's see what a pretty little lioness looks like when she's defanged." He never finished the thought. "Hey, over here." The bandit leader spun around at the sound of the new voice. Standing at the edge of the forest was a young man in a tattered orange and black jacket. He was grinning, a cocky, almost insulting grin. "Who the hell are you?" The bandit leader snarled. "Another hero." "Something like that," Naruto's clone replied, giving a jaunty wave. "Just thought I'd let you know. You're looking the wrong way." The bandit leader's eyes widened in confusion. "What are you talking ab?" The real Naruto dropped from the canopy directly above him. He was silent, a falling shadow. The bandit leader's senses screamed a warning a fraction of a second too late. He looked up, his face a mask of terror, and saw a blue, swirling sphere of death descending upon him. Rasengan. The impact was surgical. Naruto drove the sphere into the bandit leader's back. There wasn't a massive explosion, just a contained, grinding implosion of force. The man's magic dissipated instantly. The mud coffin around the woman collapsed into inert dirt. The bandit leader was thrown forward, unconscious before he even hit the ground, his grimoire fluttering uselessly to the earth. The remaining bandits froze, their minds struggling to process what had just happened. Their leader, their strongest member, had been taken out in an instant by an unknown assailant who had literally fallen from the sky. Naruto landed lightly on his feet. He didn't spare the fallen leader a glance. He turned his attention to the others, his blue eyes cold and hard. "You've got two options," he said, his voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable threat. "Leave now, or end up like him." His clone, meanwhile, poofed out of existence, the sudden disappearance adding another layer of baffling impossibility to the situation. The bandits, their morale shattered, did not need to be told twice. They scrambled over each other to flee, melting back into the forest like the cowards they were. Silence descended upon the road, broken only by the crackle of the flames still flickering on the woman's fists and the heavy sound of her breathing. The mud had released her, and she stood straight, her body tense. Her golden eyes fixed on Naruto. She was wary, suspicious, but beneath it, he could see a flicker of something else, grudging respect. She barked a question at him in her language, her tone sharp and demanding. He just offered a disarming smile and shook his head, pointing to his ears to indicate he didn't understand. This seemed to frustrate her even more. She took a step forward, her fists still burning. She was trying to assess him, to figure out if he was another, more dangerous threat. He stood his ground, making no hostile moves. He simply watched her, his gaze direct and unwavering. He needed to communicate. He needed a bridge. He closed his eyes, an idea forming in his mind. He reached back, his hand resting on the smooth leather of his grimoire. He didn't try to read it. He simply asked. He pushed his intent into the book, the desire to understand, to speak. A faint, crimson light pulsed from the grimoire, visible even through his jacket. A single page, previously blank, began to fill with intricate, glowing runes. They swirled and coalesced, forming a complex pattern that seemed to burn itself directly into his mind. It wasn't a spell he had to cast, it was knowledge. An instantaneous understanding. He opened his eyes. The world of sounds was the same, but now, it had meaning. And what kind of magic was that? Answer me, she was demanding, her voice a commanding contralto that was used to being obeyed. Naruto blinked, the new language feeling strange but natural on his tongue. It's called a Rasengan, he replied smoothly. And you're welcome, by the way. The woman stopped dead, her eyes widening in shock. You can speak our language. Just learned, he said with a shrug, tapping the grimoire at his back. This thing's full of surprises. She stared at the book, then back at him, her mind clearly racing. A grimoire that teaches you languages on the fly. And what was that symbol? A 6-leaf clover. Her gaze was sharp, analytical. I have never heard of such a thing. Who are you? My name is Naruto Uzumaki, he said. And you are. She drew herself up to her full height, an innate, unconscious arrogance in the posture. It wasn't condescending. It was the simple, ingrained confidence of someone who knew they were powerful. Mereoleona Vermilion, of the House of Vermilion. The name meant nothing to him, but the way she said it, the pride lacing her tone, told him it was important. Well, Mereoleona Vermilion of the House of Vermilion, it was nice fighting with you. You're pretty strong. The compliment was simple, direct, and utterly sincere. It caught her completely off guard. Men either feared her, tried to flatter her, or challenged her. No one just complimented her strength as if they were commenting on the weather. A faint, almost imperceptible flush rose on her cheeks. I had the situation under control, she said, her tone defensive, though it lacked its earlier bite. Sure you did, Naruto said with a grin that told her he didn't believe her for a second. But it's always faster with a little help. He walked over to the unconscious bandit leader and began searching his pockets. Mereoleona watched him, a complex expression on her face. What are you doing? Looking for information, Naruto replied, pulling out a folded, slightly crumpled piece of paper. He opened it. It was a crude map, with their current location circled. There was also a symbol drawn at the bottom, a stylized, all-seeing eye. The eye of the midnight sun, Mereoleona breathed, her voice suddenly grim. She stepped closer, looking over his shoulder. The heat radiating from her was like standing next to a furnace. These weren't just common bandits. They were working for them. You know this symbol? Naruto asked, glancing at her. They are a terrorist group, she explained, her voice tight with anger. They've been responsible for several attacks on the capital and outlying villages. They despise the kingdom, its nobles, everyone. To think they're recruiting scum like this now. She clenched her flaming fists, her mana flaring. I should have burned them to the bone. A dead man can't tell you who hired him, Naruto said calmly, folding the map and tucking it into his pocket. It was a thread to pull on in this new world. Mereoleona looked at him, her anger receding slightly, replaced by a grudging acknowledgement of his point. You fight like no one I have ever seen. That clone, the swirling sphere, it is not a magic I recognize. And you use no casting circle, no incantations. It's how I've always fought, he said, offering a half-truth. I'm from a long way away. She studied him for a long moment, her golden eyes seeming to pierce right through him. He met her gaze without flinching. There was an intensity to her, a wildness that he found compelling. She was a force of nature, and he had always been drawn to storms. Finally, she seemed to come to a decision. I am heading to the royal capital, she stated, as if it were an unchangeable fact of the universe. You are coming with me. It wasn't a question or an invitation. It was a command. Naruto just grinned. That was the plan. But it's nice to have a guide who knows the way. Do not mistake this for friendship, stranger, she warned, though the heat in her voice was tempered with something else, curiosity. You are an unknown, a powerful unknown, with a grimoire that should not exist. My duty is to bring you before the Wizard King so that he can decide what to do with you. Wizard King? He asked, intrigued. Sounds important. He is the strongest mage in the kingdom, Mereoleona said, a rare note of genuine respect in her voice. The strongest? Huh. Naruto's grin widened. I look forward to meeting him. He could see the challenge in her eyes. The silent question of whether he was arrogant or simply that powerful. He didn't offer an answer. He just started walking down the road in the direction of the capital. His hands laced behind his head in a picture of casual confidence. After a moment's hesitation, Mereoleona fell into step beside him. The air between them crackled with unspoken energy, a mixture of suspicion, intrigue, and a burgeoning, dangerous respect. The fiery lioness and the unpredictable maelstrom, two forces of nature walking the same path. The journey to the capital had just become infinitely more interesting. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Royal Capital and the Magic Knight Captains. The journey was a crash course in the Clover Kingdom, taught by the most demanding and least patient instructor Naruto could have imagined. Mereoleona did not walk. She marched, setting a relentless pace that would have left a lesser man gasping. For Naruto, it was a comfortable rhythm, a chance to observe and learn. He learned that the wild energy he felt was indeed called mana, and that it was the foundation of all life and power in this world. He learned that grimoires were not just tools but extensions of a mage's soul, granted to them at the age of 15. He learned about the Magic Knights, the 9 squads of elite mages who protected the kingdom, led by their captains and the Wizard King himself. Mereoleona spoke in blunt, declarative sentences, answering his questions with a mix of military precision and undisguised impatience. She seemed to view conversation as a necessary evil, a tool for information exchange and little else. Yet, Naruto found himself enjoying their strange rapport. He would ask a deliberately naive question, and she would respond with a witheringly sarcastic remark. He would grin, and she would scowl, though he started to notice the scowl didn't quite reach her golden eyes. So, this Wizard King, Naruto said as they crested a hill, a cool breeze ruffling his hair. Is he really the strongest? Stronger than you? Mereoleona shot him a sideways glance, her expression unreadable. The Wizard King's strength is not just in destructive power. Julius Novachrono is a master of time magic, a rare and formidable attribute. He is respected because he has earned it. Power is meaningless without results. Results? Huh, Naruto mused. I get that. He looked ahead, his senses tingling. Speaking of which, looks like we've got a chance to get some. Mereoleona's gaze sharpened. On the road ahead, a pack of massive, boar-like creatures with hides like living rock were terrorizing a merchant's cart. They were mana boars, their tusks glowing with condensed magical energy. Stay out of my way, Mereoleona grunted, her knuckles already beginning to glow. Wouldn't dream of it, Naruto replied with a grin. I'll take the 3 on the left. He didn't wait for her permission. He vanished. One moment he was beside her, the next he was a blur of orange and black, weaving between the charging beasts. Mereoleona's eyes widened slightly at his speed. She had seen it once before, but to witness it again, so casually deployed, was another matter. She didn't waste the opening. With a roar, she launched herself forward, becoming a comet of pure fire. Calidus Brachium. Her flaming fist slammed into the largest boar, the impact sending a shockwave of heat and force through the air. The creature's rocky hide cracked and melted under the intense assault. While she engaged the bulk of the pack with overwhelming force, Naruto demonstrated a different kind of mastery. He appeared in the middle of his 3 targets, a Rasengan already spinning in his hand. He didn't slam it into them. Instead, he moved with the grace of a dancer, striking each of the mana boars on their thick-muscled flanks. The impacts weren't explosive. They were concussive, the spiraling energy disrupting their internal flow of mana, causing them to stumble and collapse. Dazed and disoriented but not fatally wounded. In less than 10 seconds, the fight was over. The merchant and his family stared, mouths agape, as Mereoleona stood amidst a field of smoldering, unconscious beasts. And Naruto stood calmly dusting off his hands. She looked from her handiwork to his. He had neutralized his targets with almost surgical precision, using the minimum force necessary. It was a level of control that was, in its own way, as terrifying as her raw power. Show off, she muttered, though there was no heat in it. Just efficient, he countered, winking at the merchant's young daughter, who was peering at him from behind her father's legs. He made a funny face, and she giggled, hiding again. Mereoleona watched the small interaction, a flicker of an unreadable emotion in her eyes. This man was a complete enigma. He possessed the power of a demon and the disposition of a playful child. He was nothing like the proud, posturing nobles she despised, nor was he like the downtrodden, fearful peasants. He was just Naruto. 2 days later, they saw it. The royal capital. It rose from the plains like a dream, a breathtaking city of white stone towers, gleaming golden roofs, and graceful, impossible arches. Bridges of pure light connected floating platforms, and the air itself shimmered with a density of mana that made Naruto's skin hum. At its very center, piercing the clouds, was the royal castle. A monument to power and prestige. Whoa, Naruto breathed, his eyes wide with genuine wonder. Konoha was his home, a village of wood and stone nestled in a forest. This was something else entirely. A city built by magic and ambition. It is a gaudy monument to arrogance, Mereoleona said, her tone flat. The nobles in the noble realm live in splendor while the commoners in the forsaken realm starve. Do not be fooled by the beautiful facade. The heart of this city is rotten. Her cynicism was a stark contrast to the city's beauty, but as they entered through the massive gates and walked the bustling streets, Naruto saw the truth in her words. There was a clear, unspoken line dividing the people. Those dressed in fine silks and elaborate robes walked with their noses in the air. Their magical auras bright and arrogant. They would sneer at the common folk in their simple clothes, whose own mana felt weaker, less refined. It was a system of ingrained prejudice. A social hierarchy built on the lottery of birth and magical power. It made his blood boil. Their destination was the castle. The guards at the gate, members of the Crimson Lion's squad, snapped to attention the moment they saw Mereoleona, their expressions a mixture of terror and reverence. Lady Mereoleona, we were not expecting your return. The captain of the guard stammered. Plans change, she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. I require an immediate audience with the Wizard King. It concerns a matter of national security. She gestured with her thumb towards Naruto, who gave the guards a friendly wave. They stared back, their eyes drawn to the strange, six-leaf grimoire on his back. The castle's interior was even more opulent than its exterior. Halls of polished marble were lined with enchanted suits of armor and portraits of previous wizard kings, their stern eyes seeming to follow them as they walked. They were not led to a waiting room. The urgency in Mereoleona's demeanor, combined with her fearsome reputation, granted them immediate passage. They were ushered into a vast, circular chamber with a domed ceiling painted to look like the night sky. In the center of the room stood a man with shaggy blonde hair and a kind, almost boyish face. He wore a simple shirt and trousers beneath a magnificent red cape adorned with gold regalia. This was the Wizard King, Julius Novachrono. He was not alone. Arranged in a semicircle around him were the 9 magic knight captains. Naruto's eyes swept over them, his senses taking in a veritable feast of powerful and unique energy signatures. There was a man whose body was covered in scars, radiating a lazy but incredibly dense pressure. A stern noble with silver hair braided down his back, his mana cold and sharp as a shard of ice. A proud, handsome man with a flame-like mark over his eye who bore a striking resemblance to Mereoleona. A woman in ornate silver armor whose face was hidden by a helmet, her power coiled and patient. And a hulking, brutish man with a manic grin who looked like he wanted to dissect Naruto with his gaze alone. Ah, Mereoleona, Julius said, his voice warm and pleasant. His violet eyes, marked with a golden, 6-pointed star, fixed on Naruto, and they widened with an almost childlike glee. I felt a most peculiar surge of mana from your direction. It seems you've brought the source of it directly to me. How wonderful. Julius, Mereoleona greeted with a curt nod. This is Naruto Uzumaki. I found him in the woods near Hage. He single-handedly defeated a group of bandits working for the Eye of the Midnight Sun. His magic is unconventional, as is his grimoire. All eyes turned to the book on Naruto's back. A collective, sharp intake of breath filled the room. 6 leave. S. The proud man with the flame mark, Fugolian Vermilion, murmured, his eyes wide with disbelief. Impossible. The silver-haired noble, Nozzle Silva, sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. Grimoires only have 3 leaves for faith, hope, and love, and a 4th for good luck. A 5th contains a devil. A 6th is nothing but a fairy tale, a blasphemy. Fairy tale or not, it's right there, a gruff voice drawled. It came from the scarred man, Yami Sukahiro, captain of the Black Bulls. He was studying Naruto not with his eyes, but with something deeper. And his ki is all over the place. I've never felt anything like it. What are you, kid? Naruto met the gaze of each captain, unintimidated. He was used to being in the presence of power. He'd stood before the 5 cage and fought literal gods. This was just another Tuesday. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, he said again, his voice clear and steady. And I'm not from around here. A foreigner, Nozzle scoffed. A powerful, unknown foreigner wit. A grimoire that defies all known laws of magic appears just as the eye of the midnight sun are increasing their activities. The conclusion is obvious. He is a spy, or worse. He fought against them. Marioliona cut in, her tone sharp. I saw it myself. He is no ally of theirs. Your judgment is not infallible, Marioliona, Nozzle shot back. You have always been too quick to trust brute force over breeding and intellect. Before a full-blown argument could erupt between the two powerful nobles, Julius clapped his hands together, his smile never wavering. Now, let's not jump to conclusions. You say his magic is unconventional. I would love to see it. Would you mind, Naruto Uzumaki? Nozzle looked incensed. You would ask this, peasant, to perform magic within these hallowed halls. I certainly would, Julius replied, his eyes twinkling. I am a magic fanatic, after all. Show me something amazing. Naruto grinned. You got it. He stepped into the center of the room. He didn't open his grimoire. He didn't chant an incantation. He simply brought his hands together in the cross seal. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. The room exploded with puffs of smoke. When it cleared, the captains found themselves surrounded. 100 Narutos stood in the audience chamber, each one a perfect, solid copy. They filled every available space, some leaning casually against the walls. Others perched on the windowsills, a few even hanging upside down from the chandeliers. Each one radiated the same bizarre, potent energy as the original. The chamber was silent, save for the manic giggling of Jack the Ripper, captain of the Green Mantis. So many of him. I want to cut them all. Yami let out a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned. Fugolian's eyes were wide, analyzing the sheer scale of the spell. Nozzle's face was a mask of stunned disbelief and utter fury. This was not a spell. This was an army, created in an instant. The original Naruto, standing next to Julius, held up a single hand. Wait, I'm not done. In unison, each of the 100 clones held up a hand. A swirling sphere of blue and crimson energy appeared in each palm. The combined sound of 100 Rasengans filled the room, a deafening hum of compressed power that made the very air vibrate. This spell, it creates living soldiers, each capable of casting their own powerful attack spells. Fugolian asked, his voice tight with awe and concern. The strategic implications are staggering. Julius's eyes were sparkling so brightly they seemed to contain entire galaxies. He was practically vibrating with excitement. Incredible. To create so many independent, sentient mana constructs, each with such a high level of offensive capability. It's not creation magic, not summoning magic, it's something entirely new. How does it work? What is the principle behind it? Oh, I simply must study it. Naruto dismissed the clones and their Rasengans with a thought. They vanished in puffs of smoke, leaving the room silent once more. I can't explain it, Naruto said honestly. It's just what I do. A power you cannot explain is a power you cannot control, Nozzle hissed, recovering his composure. He is a threat. He must be contained. Contained. Yami grunted, stepping forward. Kid just showed us he's a one-man army and you want to try and stick him in a cage. Good luck with that. I say let him run wild. He seems like my kind of lunatic. Enough, Julius said, his cheerful demeanor hardening into one of absolute authority. The shift was instantaneous and startling. For a brief moment, they were all reminded why this magic-obsessed man was the Wizard King. Nozzle, your caution is noted, but it is colored by your prejudice. Yami, your enthusiasm is appreciated, but we cannot be reckless. He turned back to Naruto, his expression softening again. Naruto Uzumaki, your power is undeniable, and your origins are a complete mystery. We cannot allow someone like you to wander the kingdom unchecked. However, imprisoning a man who saved citizens from our enemies goes against everything the Magic Knights stand for. He paused, a thoughtful expression on his face. So, I have a proposal. In 1 week is the annual Magic Knights entrance exam. I will grant you temporary citizenship and allow you to participate. It will be the perfect stage to demonstrate your abilities and your character to all 9 captains. If you are chosen by a captain, you will join their squad. You will serve the Clover Kingdom, and in return, we will provide you with a home and a purpose here. If you are not chosen, we will cross that bridge when we come to it. It was a test, an offer, and a subtle threat all rolled into one. Naruto understood perfectly. You want me to become a magic knight? He asked. I want to see what you are truly capable of, Julius corrected gently. And I believe placing you within our structure is the best way to do that. What do you say? Naruto thought of his own world, of his dream to become Hokage. The leader and protector of his village. This was different, but the core of it felt familiar. To be part of something, to protect people, to get stronger alongside comrades. He broke into a wide, confident grin. All right, I'm in. Sounds like fun. A few of the captains, Nozzle in particular, looked scandalized by his casual acceptance of such a prestigious offer. Yami laughed out loud, a booming, appreciative sound. Mereoleona, who had remained silent throughout the demonstration, watched him with an intensity that was almost unnerving. She had brought a hurricane to the capital, and it had just agreed to be bottled. She wondered how long the bottle would last. Excellent. Julius beamed. The exam is in 1 week. Until then, find yourself an inn, explore the city, and prepare yourself. I have a feeling you are going to make things very, very interesting. As the captains began to disperse, still murmuring about what they had witnessed, Mereoleona stopped Naruto at the door. You exceeded my expectations, she said. It was the highest form of praise he could imagine receiving from her. But do not become arrogant. The exam is not just about power. They will test your control, your judgment, and your spirit. Do not disappoint me. She turned and walked away, her crimson cape sweeping behind her, leaving him alone in the grand marble hallway. He was in the heart of a new world, with a clear path laid before him. 1 week. 1 week to prove to this entire kingdom that Naruto Uzumaki had arrived. He looked out a grand window at the sprawling city below, a fire igniting in his gut. This was a good first step. The real adventure was just beginning. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Black Bull and the Golden Dawn. The royal capital was a city of a million noises. The clatter of carriage wheels on cobblestone, the endless murmur of the crowd, the distant chime of bell towers marking the hours. It was a symphony of life, chaotic and vibrant. For Naruto, it was a stark contrast to the rustling leaves and birdsong of Konoha. He walked its streets not as a tourist, but as a shinobi on reconnaissance, his senses absorbing every detail, every whispered rumor. Every resentful glance a commoner shot at a passing noble. Mereoleona's words about the city's rotten heart echoed in his mind. He saw it everywhere, in the way a shopkeeper would bow and scrape to a finely dressed woman, only to sneer at a farmer moments later, in the pristine, magically swept avenues of the noble realm compared to the grimy, crowded streets of the common realm. It was a rigid, unfair system, and it grated on the core of his being. His first, most pressing problem was a mundane one: he was broke. The concept of money had always been a bit abstract to him, his needs had been simple. And the village had always provided. Here, he was a ghost, with no identity and no currency. He found a modest but clean-looking inn, the Leaping Boar, and when the portly innkeeper asked for a down payment, Naruto could only offer a sheepish grin and empty pockets. No coin, no room, the man said gruffly, already turning away. Naruto sighed. He could have intimidated the man, or used a transformation to trick him, but that wasn't his style. He needed to be self-sufficient. He stepped back out onto the busy street, an idea sparking in his mind. He ducked into a quiet alleyway, performed the familiar cross seal, and a dozen shadow clones popped into existence around him. All right, listen up, he whispered to his copies. We need money. Spread out, find some work. Construction, delivery, anything that pays quick and doesn't ask questions. Don't cause any trouble, and be back here by sunset. Go. The clones dispersed, melting into the city's hustle and bustle. It was a perfect, low-risk way to gather funds and information simultaneously. By late afternoon, the clones returned one by one, dispelling and flooding his mind with their experiences. One had earned Handful of coins helping a crew of masons lift heavy enchanted stones, his unnatural strength drawing odd stares. Another had worked as a runner, his speed making him the most efficient delivery boy the merchant had ever seen. By the time the last clone vanished, Naruto's pockets were jingling with a respectable amount of local currency. He walked back into the Leaping Boar, dropped a pile of coins on the counter with a triumphant grin, and secured a room for the week. That evening, he sought out the heart of the city's information network, a tavern. He found one called the Tipsy Pixie, a lively, noisy place filled with off-duty magic knights, merchants, and travelers. The air was thick with the smell of cheap ale and roasted meat. He found a seat at the crowded bar, ordered a meal, and simply listened. The main topic of conversation, buzzing with anticipation and gossip, was the upcoming Magic Knight's entrance exam. "Heard a commoner from the sticks got the 4-leaf grimoire this year," one man slurred to his friend. "From Hage, of all places." "Pathetic," his companion scoffed. "A noble's weapon in a peasant's hands. He'll probably be torn apart in the first round." Nozzle Silva W. Old never let someone like that into the Silver Eagles. Naruto filed the information away. "So, Yuno was already famous. Good for him." "Forget the 4-leaf kid," a woman's voice, husky and laced with amusement, cut through the din. "I heard a real monster showed up at the castle. Dropped out of the sky and made all 9 captains stand up and pay attention." Naruto felt a presence slide onto the stool next to him. He turned and was met with a pair of playful, violet eyes and a disarming smile. The woman was tall and curvaceous, dressed in little more than a witch's hat, a bikini top, and a pair of dark briefs. Her crimson lion's robe worn open like a cape. She held a half-empty bottle of wine in one hand and radiated an aura of lazy, confident charm. It was her mana that was truly interesting. It felt like a fine, invisible thread, weaving through the chaos of the room, subtly nudging luck and fate. "You must be the monster," she said, her voice a low purr. "You don't have the mana signature of anyone I know. It's wild, untamed. I'm Vanessa Enoteka, and you are." Naruto found himself grinning back. Her forwardness was refreshing. "Naruto Uzumaki. And I'm not a monster, just new in town." "A new toy, then," she teased, taking a long drink from her bottle. "You caused quite a stir. The captains are all talking. Fugalian is intrigued, Nozzle is furious, and my captain, well, he's probably already forgotten about it." She sighed dramatically. "So, which squad are you hoping to join, Naruto Uzumaki?" "Haven't decided yet," he admitted. "I was going to see who'd have me." "The Black Bulls would take you," a gruff voice cut in. Naruto looked past Vanessa to see Yami Sukahiro leaning against the bar, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He hadn't even sensed the captain's approach. The man's ki was so tightly controlled it was like a black hole, absorbing all presence. "Captain Yami," Vanessa cooed. "Don't you have some paperwork to be avoiding?" "Shut up, you drunk," Yami grunted. Though there was no malice in it. He looked Naruto up and down. "The Wizard King is a pain in the ass, but he's not an idiot. He wouldn't have put you in the exam if he didn't think you had potential. My squad is full of losers, outcasts, and weirdos with more power than sense. You'd fit right in." It was the strangest recruitment pitch Naruto had ever heard. "He's saying he likes you," Vanessa translated with a wink. Yami just grunted again, pushing a glass of potent-smelling liquor towards Naruto. "Drink up, kid. The exam's a bitch. You'll need it." Naruto accepted the drink, the THREE of them falling into a comfortable silence amidst the tavern's roar. He felt a strange sense of belonging with these two. They were powerful, but they didn't carry themselves with the suffocating arrogance of the nobles he'd seen. They were outsiders, just like he was. The Black Bulls. He'd keep them in mind. The next few days passed in a blur of exploration and preparation. He used his clones to map the city, learn its customs, and train in secluded areas, refining his control over the volatile new energy in his veins. He learned to form a Rasengan that was perfectly stable, and another that was wild and explosive. He practiced his taijutsu, his movements faster and stronger than ever, augmented by the constant flow of mana from the atmosphere. One afternoon, while walking through the commoners' market, he heard a familiar, impossibly loud voice. "I'm going to become the Wizard King. You'll see." Naruto chuckled and rounded a corner to see Asta, shirtless and doing one-handed push-ups in a public square. While Yuno stood nearby, looking completely unbothered by the spectacle. A small crowd had gathered, some laughing, some sneering. "You're going to wear yourself out before the exam even starts," Naruto said. Walking up to them, Asta leapt to his feet, his eyes sparkling with hero worship. "Naruto, it's you. Are you here for the exam too?" "Something like that," Naruto said. "This is Yuno," Asta said. Gesturing to his rival, "He got the 4-leaf grimoire." Yuno gave a slight, respectful nod. "It is an honor to see you again. Your display of magic in Hage was enlightening." "It was nothing," Naruto said. Waving it off, he looked at Asta, at his raw, boundless determination. "You've got a lot of spirit, kid. But spirit alone won't get you through. You need to be smart. Use your opponent's strength against them." He was about to say more when a sudden, chilling sensation washed over him. The air grew heavy, the cheerful noise of the market square seeming to warp and distort. It was a feeling he recognized from the war, the activation of a high-level spatial jutsu. "Get down," he yelled, shoving Asta and Yuno to the ground. A heartbeat later, the space where He had been standing folded in on itself with a sickening, silent implosion. The cobblestones, a market stall, and the very air were twisted into a shimmering, non-Euclidean shape before vanishing entirely. Panic erupted in the square as people screamed and fled. Naruto was on his feet in an instant, his eyes scanning the rooftops. There, a figure cloaked in black, wearing a white mask featureless save for a single, stylized red eye. The Eye of the Midnight Sun. 2 future pillars of this corrupt kingdom, the figure's voice echoed, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was warped, unnatural, and a wild, unknown variable. The plan was to observe, but this opportunity is too perfect. "You will all be erased." The space around them began to bend. Buildings stretched like taffy, the ground buckled, and the sky seemed to ripple. "I can't hit him," Yuno yelled, launching a blade of wind that simply dissipated as it entered a pocket of distorted space. Asta drew his massive, rusty sword, its anti-magic properties causing the air around it to fizzle. "What is this stuff?" "Spatial magic," Naruto said, his eyes narrowed, his mind racing. "He controls the space around us. A direct attack is useless. He created a dozen shadow clones. Spread out. Find the real one. He's projecting his voice." The clones scattered, leaping into the distorted landscape. Several were immediately caught in spatial traps, twisted and erased with a silent puff of smoke. But the information they sent back was instantaneous. It was a game of cat and mouse, and Naruto was a master of it. The real attacker was hidden in a warped alleyway, enjoying the show. He saw one of the orange-clad figures leap directly towards a spatial distortion and scoffed at the fool's stupidity. But the clone wasn't the attack. It was the distraction. The real Naruto, moving silently through the chaos, appeared directly behind the masked man. He had used the distorted space as cover, his shinobi senses, allowing him to navigate the impossible terrain. "Boo," he said calmly. The spatial mage whirled around, his composure shattering. He had no time to warp himself away. A blue sphere of grinding, on-flecked energy was already inches from his chest. Rasengan. The impact was absolute. The Rasengan tore through the mage's defensive mana and slammed into him, sending him flying through the very alley wall he had been using for cover. The complex spatial spell collapsed instantly, the market square snapping back to reality with a sound like a thunderclap. Naruto landed lightly beside the groaning, defeated mage. He ripped the mask from the man's face. He was young, with frantic, hate-filled eyes. "The light is coming," the man choked out, blood trickling from his lips. "The chosen ones will descend, and this world of discrimination will be washed away in a tide of righteous fury." He then went limp, unconscious. Before Naruto could question him further, a new presence announced itself. A massive, swirling vortex of light descended from the sky, resolving into the form of a man with golden hair, wearing an ornate, animal-like mask and the regal cape of a magic knight captain. He was surrounded by a retinue of knights in golden armor. "That is enough, villain," the man said, his voice calm and melodic, yet carrying an immense weight of authority. It was William Vengeance, captain of the Golden Dawn. His eyes, visible through the mosque slits, took in the scene. The unconscious terrorist, the two stunned boys from Hage, and Naruto, standing over the defeated foe with a strange, powerful energy still humming around him. You must be the newcomer Julius spoke of, William said, his gaze lingering on Naruto. To defeat a spatial mage of this caliber so easily, your abilities are as remarkable as he claimed. Just taking out the trash, Naruto replied, his expression neutral. He could feel the power rolling off this man in waves. It was vast, ancient, and felt familiar, in a way that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The Golden Dawn will take this filth into custody and interrogate him, William announced. You have performed a great service to the kingdom. He gave a slight, courteous bow. I look forward to seeing more of your skills at the exam. With that, his knights secured the unconscious mage, and William and his squad vanished in another swirl of light. As quickly as they had appeared, Asta and Yuno stared at Naruto, their expressions a mixture of awe and gratitude. You saved us, Asta stammered. That's twice now, Yuno added, his voice quiet but filled with an undeniable respect. Just be more careful, Naruto said, clapping them both on the shoulder. This city is more dangerous than it looks. I'll see you at the exam. Try to keep up. He turned and walked away, leaving the two rivals to stare after him. He had thought this exam would just be a fun challenge, a way to find his place. But now, he knew better. There was a real darkness brewing in this kingdom, a hatred that ran deep. The eye of the midnight sun. The chosen ones, the mage had spoken of. He looked up at the castle in the distance. Joining the Magic Knights was no longer just a proposal. It was a necessity. He had stumbled into another war, and he'd be damned if he was going to sit on the sidelines. The morning of the exam dawned bright and clear. Naruto stood before a massive coliseum, the roar of the crowd already audible from within. He felt a familiar thrill, the electric anticipation of a battle to come. He was ready. This world was about to see what a shinobi could really do. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Trials of Fire and a Bull's Decree. The Magic Knight's entrance exam was held in a colossal, open-air arena that vibrated with the nervous energy of 1,000 hopefuls. The stands were packed with a jeering, cheering, and gossiping public, from the highest nobles in their private boxes to the common folk crammed onto the stone benches. For a moment, the sheer scale of it, the roar of the crowd, brought a nostalgic pang of the Chunin exams to Naruto's heart. But this was different. The air wasn't filled with the scent of burning leaves and steel. It was thick with the crackle of raw mana, 1,000 different magical signatures clashing and combining into a chaotic symphony. Naruto stood amongst the candidates, a sea of anxious teenagers. His tattered orange jacket stood out like a bonfire in a field of snow against their simple tunics and the occasional fine robe. He immediately became a target for whispers and sneers. Look at that vagrant. Does he really think he has a chance? His mana is strange. It feels chaotic, unrefined. Probably some gutter rat from the Forsaken Realm who got lucky with a grimoire. Naruto ignored them, his gaze fixed on the high balcony where the 9 Magic Knight captains were taking their seats. He saw Fugolian Vermilion, his expression stern and regal. He saw Nozzle Silva, whose lip was already curled in a permanent sneer of disdain. He saw William Vengeance, a serene, enigmatic presence behind his mask. And he saw Yami Sukahiro, who slouched into his chair, yawned, and looked profoundly bored with the entire affair. Hey, Naruto! Asta's familiar shout cut through the murmur. He and Yuno were making their way through the crowd. Asta was practically bouncing on the balls of his feet. His energy a stark contrast to Yuno's calm, collected demeanor. Can you believe it? We're finally here. Asta beamed, his eyes shining. Let's give it everything we've got. Try not to overdo it before the first test. Yuno said coolly, though a flicker of excitement was visible in his eyes. He gave Naruto a respectful nod. May the best mages be chosen. Just focus on what you can do, Naruto advised, clapping them both on their shoulders. Don't get psyched out by the fancy nobles or the big crowd. It's just you and your magic. I don't have any magic, Asta declared proudly. Naruto just grinned. That's what makes you dangerous. The exam began with a booming announcement from the Wizard King, who appeared on the balcony in a shimmer of time magic, his cheerful demeanor a calming presence over the nervous crowd. He explained the series of tests, designed to evaluate magical power, control, and aptitude. The first test was broom flight. 1,000 brooms were magically distributed to the candidates. Asta looked at his with utter betrayal. Yuno hopped on his effortlessly, rising into the air with the grace of a bird. The sky quickly filled with wobbling, soaring, and occasionally plummeting teenagers. Naruto picked up the simple wooden broom. He channeled a bit of his energy into it. Nothing happened. He tried again, pushing more of the chakra mana hybrid into the wood. The broom shuddered and then splintered, falling apart in his hands. The nobles nearby howled with laughter. He can't even fly a broom. What a failure. Naruto ignored them, his mind already working. He couldn't use their tools. So he'd use his own. He tossed the remains of the broom aside, took a few steps back, and created a single shadow clone. The clone crouched, lacing its hands together to form a platform. What is he doing now? A candidate muttered. The real Naruto took a running start and planted his foot firmly in his clone's hands. Now, he yelled. With a mighty heave, the clone threw him. Naruto shot into the air like a cannonball, soaring in a perfect arc high above the other candidates. For a brief, breathtaking moment, he was the highest person in the sky. As gravity began to take hold, he created another clone in midair. This clone grabbed him, twisted, and threw him again, a midair relay that propelled him even higher. He repeated the process 3 more times. A dazzling display of acrobatic teamwork with himself, before landing perfectly in the center of the arena as the clones poofed away. A stunned silence fell over the arena. Even the captains on their balcony were leaning forward. He used a clone as a catapult, Fugolian murmured, his analytical eyes wide with fascination. Ingenious, unconventional, but undeniably effective. Yami let out a short, barking laugh. The idiot's got style, I'll give him that. The next tests followed in quick succession. A test of magical creation had candidates manifest objects of pure mana. While off, RS created shimmering birds of light or fragile water sculptures. Naruto, drawing on his new power, created a perfect, solid replica of an Ichiraku ramen bowl, complete with steaming broth and detailed toppings. It wasn't an illusion of mana. It was a tangible object, a feat of creation magic that baffled the examiners. A test of accuracy had them firing magical projectiles at moving targets. Naruto formed a recentricon, small and controlled, and threw it. The miniature blade of wind didn't just hit the central target, it sliced through it and a dozen others in a perfectly straight line before dissipating. A display of destructive power and precision that left a smoking trench in the arena wall. With each test, the whispers of ridicule turned into murmurs of awe, then into shouts of disbelief. The vagrant from the sticks was systematically shattering every expectation. Finally, came the main event, the combat trials. Candidates were paired off for one-on-one battles. Asta, lacking magic, was pitted against the arrogant Sek Bronziza. With a single, decisive swing of his anti-magic sword, Asta shattered Seki's bronze shield, and knocked him unconscious, a shocking victory of pure physical might. Yuno, with his 4-leaf grimoire, was matched against a haughty noble, whom he defeated with an elegant and overwhelmingly powerful tornado of wind, never even breaking a sweat. Then, Naruto's name was called. His opponent was a tall, muscular noble named Valerius, who specialized in diamond magic. So you're the one making all the noise, Valerius sneered as they took their positions. Let me show you the difference between a flashy peasant trick and true noble power. Diamond creation magic. Fortress Aegis. Thick, interlocking plates of shimmering, transparent diamond erupted from the ground, forming a seamless, impenetrable dome around Valerius. The crowd gasped. The Fortress Aegis was known as one of the strongest defensive spells of its class. My defense is absolute, Valerius boasted from within his shield. You can't even touch me. Give up. Naruto didn't reply. He created a dozen shadow clones, which immediately rushed the dome, hammering on it with their fists and feet. The diamond plates didn't even scratch. Fools. It's useless. Valerius laughed. That's what you think, the real Naruto said. Valerius's eyes widened. The voice hadn't come from outside the dome. It came from above. He looked up. Naruto was falling from the sky, a spinning blue sphere in his hand. He had created a clone high in the air at the start of the match, which had remained unnoticed. The clones attacking the dome were just a diversion for the crowd and for Valerius. He hid a clone in the sun's glare, William Vengeance observed quietly from the balcony. A simple but brilliant tactic. Rasengan. Naruto roared, slamming the sphere down onto the apex of the diamond dome. The result was not an explosion, but a high-frequency vibration that shook the entire arena. The Rasengan's chaotic, grinding rotation didn't try to break the diamond, it attacked its magical structure, its very foundation. Cracks, like a spider's web, erupted from the point of impact. For a second, the fortress aegis held. Then, with a sound like 1,000 shattering chandeliers, it imploded into a shower of harmless, glittering dust. Naruto landed lightly in front of the stunned Valerius, who stood defenseless. His mouth hanging open in disbelief. Naruto didn't even hit him. He just tapped him on the forehead with 2 fingers. The noble's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed in a heap. The match was over. The silence that followed was deafening, before the crowd erupted into a roar of pure, unadulterated shock and excitement. The final stage of the exam was the selection. The remaining candidates lined up, and one by one, the captains would raise their hands if they wished to recruit them. Many received no offers, leaving with their dreams crushed. Then came Yuno. He stepped forward, his expression calm. One by one, hands went up. Fugolian, Nozzle, William, Charlotte, Jack, every single one. All 9 captains wanted the boy with the 4-leaf grimoire. It was an unprecedented event. I have decided, Yuno said, his voice ringing with clarity. I wish to join the Golden Dawn. A murmur of approval went through the crowd. The best squad for the best rookie. It was a natural fit. Next was Asta. He stepped forward, his body tense with hope. The announcer called his number. Silence. Not a single hand was raised. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Asta's hopeful expression began to crumble. No magic. It's a fatal flaw, a captain murmured. He has strength, but it's too much of a liability. Just as Asta was about to be dismissed, Yami Sukahiro stood up, a cloud of smoke drifting from his cigarette. Hold on, he growled. Nobody wants him. Fine, I'll take him. He grinned, a fierce, predatory expression. Hey, shorty, I don't care if you have magic or not. You proved you have grit. Join the Black Bulls and show me you can become something to be proud of. Or die trying. Asta stared, tears welling in his eyes, before breaking into the biggest, most determined grin imaginable. Yes, sir. Finally, it was Naruto's turn. He stepped forward, the arena falling into a hushed anticipation. Candidate number 164, step forward. There was no hesitation. Fugolian Vermilion's hand shot up. His power and tactical mind would be a great asset to the Crimson Lion Kings. William Vengeance's hand followed. Such potential deserves to be nurtured in the finest squad. The Golden Dawn would welcome him. Charlotte Rosalie, captain of the Blue Rose Knights, raised her hand. His strength is undeniable. Jack the Ripper cackled, raising his. I want to see what he can cut. One after another, the hands went up. Even Nozzle Silva, after a long, agonizing moment of visible conflict, raised his hand a bare, grudging inch, his pride warring with the undeniable reality of Naruto's power. It was a strategic asset he couldn't afford to let a rival squad have. In the end, 8 hands were raised. The only captain who hadn't made an offer was Yami. He just slouched in his chair, watching. Naruto looked at the raised hands. The Golden Dawn, the most prestigious. The Crimson Lions, a squad of royalty. The Silver Eagles, the pinnacle of nobility. Any one of them was a ticket to the top. He took a deep breath. I've made my decision. He turned and looked directly at the one captain who hadn't offered him a spot. He looked at the squad that had already accepted the magic-less outcast. He thought of the stuffy nobles, the rigid system, and the 2 black bulls he'd met in the tavern who felt more real than anyone in the royal capital. I want to join the Black Bulls. A collective gasp went through the entire stadium. He had chosen the worst, most destructive, dead last squad in the Magic Knights over the elite. It was madness. Nozzle Silva looked as if he'd been slapped. William Vengeance tilted his head, his masked expression unreadable. Yami Sukahiro blinked, then let out a booming laugh that echoed through the arena. He stood up and pointed a thumb at himself. You sure, kid, we're the dregs, the absolute bottom of the barrel. A bunch of destructive misfits. Sounds like my kind of place, Naruto said with a wide, unshakable grin. Yami's laugh grew louder. All right then. Get over here. Welcome to the worst day of the rest of your life. Naruto walked away from the stunned captains and the disbelieving crowd. He walked past a shocked Yuno and a beaming Asta, and stood before Yami Sukahiro. He had made his choice. He hadn't chosen prestige or power. He had chosen a family of outcasts. He had chosen a home. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Madhouse and the Dungeon's Call. The journey to the Black Bull's headquarters was not a journey at all. One moment, Naruto was standing in the noisy, crowded capital, Asta vibrating with excitement beside him. The next, a suave-looking man with a flirtatious smile and the squad's robe, Finral Rulak, opened a swirling oval of distorted space. Right this way to the finest establishment in the kingdom, Finral said with a wink. Yami grabbed Naruto and Asta by the back of their collars and unceremoniously tossed them through the portal. They tumbled out onto a patch of scruffy grass, the port. Al snapping shut behind them with a faint pop. They were in a clearing in a dense, dark forest. Before them stood the most bizarre building Naruto had ever seen. It was a chaotic, lopsided mishmash of architectural styles, part castle, part crooked manor, part junkyard. Towers jutted out at odd angles, new sections seemed to have been bolted on as an afterthought, and the entire structure groaned and shifted. Walls extending and retracting with a mind of their own. Welcome, Yami grunted, stepping out of a second portal with Finral. To the Black Bull's hideout. It's moving, Asta said, his jaw slack. Yeah, the guy who built it was weird, Yami said, scratching his stomach. Alright, brats. Rule number 1. Don't destroy the base. Rule number 2. Surpass your limits. If you're about to die, break past your limits and survive. If you embarrass me, you're dead. Now get inside. He kicked the massive front door open with a resounding crash. The scene inside was somehow even more chaotic than the exterior. The main room was a sprawling, cavernous space littered with empty bottles, half-eaten plates of food, and scorch marks. A tipsy Vanessa Enoteka was lounging on a sofa, a battle-crazed young man with blonde hair and a psychotic grin was zapping things with lightning, and a hulking man in a strange mask was setting fire to a piece of meat with his bare hands. Oh, look what the captain dragged in, Vanessa purred, raising her wine bottle in a toast. Welcome to the madhouse, boys. The blonde kid, Luck, zipped in front of Naruto in a crackle of lightning, his blue eyes wide and unsettlingly focused. You're the one from the exam. Your energy is so weird and strong. Fight me. Before Naruto could answer, a jet of fire shot past his head, narrowly missing Luck. Back off, you battle freak. A young man with sunglasses and a delinquent's pompadour roared. This was Magna's swing. He pointed a finger at Asta. You, the other new kid, you're a commoner, right? From some village called Hage. Yeah, that's me, Asta said proudly. I'm a commoner too, from Ryaka village. Magna declared. Which means we're rivals. You gotta go through a proper baptism by fire to join the Black Bulls. Let's go. He started generating a flaming baseball bat in his hand. A fight. Can I join? Can I join? Luck chanted, buzzing around them like a deranged hummingbird. The chaos escalated. A massive, sister-obsessed noble named Gauche Adlai appeared, sneering at them before focusing on a picture of his beloved little sister. A tiny girl, Charmy, sat at a table devouring a sheep, and a shy, hulking figure in the corner kept changing shape. Yami sighed, the sound like grinding rocks. Can you idiots shut up for 5 seconds? This is why we're the worst squad. He turned to Naruto and Asta. This is your new family. Try not to kill each other. Magna, not to be deterred, dragged Asta outside for his initiation. Naruto watched from the doorway, leaning against the frame. Magna threw a series of powerful, flaming baseballs, which Asta either deflected with his massive sword or dodged with a surprising agility honed by years of intense physical training. The fight ended when Asta got close enough to land a solid punch, sending Magna sprawling. It was less a magical duel and more a back-alley brawl, and it ended with Magna laughing and slinging an arm around a bewildered Asta, declaring him a true man. Okay, my turn, Luck sang, appearing in front of Naruto, his hands crackling with lightning. Lightning magic. Thunderclap crumbling orb. He fired a sphere of Condensed lightning directly at Naruto's face. Naruto didn't move. He simply raised one hand, palm open. The lightning sphere hit it and fizzled. He hadn't negated it like Asta's sword. He had caught it, his unique energy absorbing and grounding the attack with an ease that was utterly terrifying. Luck's psychotic grin widened. You're even better than I thought. This is going to be so much fun. He became a blur of motion, zipping around Naruto, launching kicks and punches imbued with lightning. He was fast, and humanly so. But to Naruto, who had fought the fourth Raikage and Kagaya, it was Lee. K watching a bee try to sting a hurricane. He dodged and weaved, his movements minimal and precise, never taking a step back. My turn, Naruto said calmly. He vanished, not with lightning speed, but with the silent, traceless movement of a seasoned shinobi. Luck's eyes widened, his senses screaming as he tried to locate Naruto's mana. But it was gone, suppressed. He felt a presence behind him and spun around, lashing out with a lightning-wreathed fist. His fist passed through empty air. Naruto was already above him, upside down, held in place by sticking to the ceiling with his feet. He dropped down, a Rasengan forming in his hand, the grinding sound sending a shiver of pure, primal fear through the battle-addicted mage. Yield, Naruto said, the sphere of power hovering an inch from Luck's face. The pressure it emitted made the air heavy. Luck stared at the Rasengan, then at Naruto's calm, steady eyes. His grin faded, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated awe. He dropped his lightning magic, raising his hands in surrender. Okay, you win. Wow, you're so strong. Can we be friends? Can we fight again tomorrow? Naruto dispelled the Rasengan and landed lightly on his feet. Sure, but next time, buy me dinner first. The casual joke broke the tension. The other bulls who had gathered to watch stared at Naruto with newfound respect. He hadn't just beaten their most manic fighter. He had dominated him with a level of skill and composure that was completely alien to their squad's usual brand of chaotic brawling. It was in this moment that a new figure appeared from a hallway, drawn by the commotion. A young girl with silver hair tied in twintails, wearing the Black Bull's robe over a fine, noble-looking tunic. Her face was a mask of aristocratic disdain, but her violet eyes held a deep, flickering insecurity. What is all this peasant-like racket? She demanded, her voice high and haughty. I am trying to concentrate. Ah, Noel, Vanessa said lazily. Meet the new recruits. This one's Naruto. Try not to drown him. Noel Silva, a royal of the House of Silva, looked Naruto up and down as if he were something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. I saw you at the exam. Why would anyone with your power choose this garbage heap? Seemed like a fun place, Naruto said with an easygoing shrug that only seemed to irritate her more. Fun, she scoffed. Magic is a tool of the nobility, a symbol of our power and grace. It is not for fun. As she spoke, her emotions began to get the better of her. Her mana, powerful but incredibly unstable, flared erratically. The water vapor in the air began to condense, forming a swirling vortex of water around her. Uh-oh, Magna muttered, backing away. Here we go again. I'm not doing this. Noelle stammered, her face flushed with shame and panic as the sphere of water grew, threatening to flood the entire room. Stop. Obey me. The spell, however, did not obey. It was a manifestation of her raw, uncontrolled power. Lashing out wildly, the other Black Bulls scrambled for high ground, used to the routine. Naruto didn't move. He watched the swirling vortex, his expression calm. He saw not a failed royal, but a scared kid whose own power was betraying her. He made a single, almost lazy, hand sign. A shadow clone popped into existence directly beside the panicked Noelle, inside the watery sphere. The real Naruto, from his position, focused his energy. He didn't try to overpower her magic. He simply pushed a gentle, steady stream of his own calming energy into her raging mana vortex via the clone. It was like pouring a soothing balm on a raging fire. The clone placed a hand on Noelle's shoulder. Hey, it's okay, it said, its voice calm and reassuring. Just breathe. Noelle flinched at the contact. But the clone's calm presence and the strange, warm energy that was suddenly seeping into her spell had an immediate effect. The raging vortex slowed, the water losing its violent momentum. Within seconds, it collapsed. splashing harmlessly onto the floor in a massive puddle. Silence. The black bulls stared. No one had ever been able to stop one of Noelle's rampages so quickly, so gently. Noelle stood trembling in the middle of the puddle, staring at the clone beside her, then at the real Naruto across the room. She was mortified, exposed, and utterly confused. I didn't need your help, you stupid commoner. She yelled, her voice cracking. She turned and fled back down the hallway, leaving a trail of wet footprints. The clone poofed away. Well damn, Magna said, breaking the silence. Nobody's ever done that before. Usually, we just wait for Yami to come punch the water. You have a delicate touch, Naruto, Vanessa purred, her eyes alight with interest. Before anyone else could comment, Yami strode back into the room, holding a piece of paper. All right, you lazy bastards. I've got a mission for you. He unrolled a map. A new dungeon has been discovered on the border with the Diamond Kingdom. The Wizard King wants it explored and its treasures secured before they can get their hands on it. Full of traps, ancient magic, the usual crap. He looked around the room, his gaze landing on his new recruits. Asta, Naruto, you're up. Your first mission. His eyes then fell on the hallway where Noelle had fled. And you, royalty, get out here. Noelle hesitantly reappeared, refusing to look at Naruto. You're going too, Yami commanded. You're a royal. You've had the best education on ancient history and magic theory. You're our brains. Don't screw it up. He then pointed at Luck. And you're good at sniffing out traps. You're going too. Try not to get everyone killed for fun. Luck cheered. Asta roared with excitement. Noelle looked horrified at the prospect of being stuck with them. Naruto just grinned. A dungeon. It sounded like an adventure, a real one. A chance to see what this world was really made of. Finral, open a portal to Saucy Village. It's the closest town to the dungeon, Yami ordered. Now get out of my sight. And bring me back something shiny. Finral obliged, a swirling gateway appearing in the middle of the room. The WLY formed team, the powerhouse with a secret, the boy with no magic, the girl who couldn't control hers, and the battle maniac, stood before it. All right, team, let's do this, Asta yelled, pumping his fist. Naruto stepped through the portal, the darkness of the dungeon already calling to him. This was it, the first step into the unknown. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Sunken Temple and the Diamond's Shadow. The world dissolved into a swirl of distorted space and reappeared with the scent of salt and damp earth. Finral's portal deposited them on a cliff overlooking a churning, gray sea. Below, STLED in a cove at the base of the cliffs, was the small fishing village of Saucy. It was a cluster of stone and driftwood houses, huddled together against the constant, biting wind that swept in from the ocean. The air was heavy with the nervous tension of a border town. Well, this is rustic, Noelle sniffed, pulling her black bull's robe tighter around herself as if to ward off the sheer commonness of the place. It's awesome. The sea, Asta yelled, running to the cliff's edge, his eyes wide with a wonder that only someone who had grown up landlocked could possess. The mana is thick here, but it's wild, unfocused. Luck commented, his head tilted like a curious predator. And there's another kind of mana, sharp and sterile. It doesn't feel like it belongs to the Clover Kingdom. The Diamond Kingdom, Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the gray sea met a gray sky. He could feel it too, a faint but persistent pressure from the east. A nation's magical signature. They're close. Let's get down to the village and find out where this dungeon is before we get any unwanted company. The villagers were wary. They spoke of the dungeon with fear, calling it the Sunken Temple. They said it had risen from the seabed during a recent earthquake, a structure of black, unfamiliar stone that hummed with a malevolent power. It was located in a series of sea caves a few miles up the coast. Accessible only during low tide. They also spoke of Diamond Kingdom mages, seen scouting the coastline just days before. Sounds like a race, then, Naruto said, a determined grin on his face. Let's not keep them waiting. Quote, the entrance to the Sunken Temple was a massive, arching gateway of black, obsidian-like rock, covered in ancient, glowing runes that pulsed with a soft, blue light. The air here was cold, and the sound of the ocean was replaced by a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate in their very bones. These runes, They're from the primordial age, Noelle murmured. Her eyes wide with a scholar's fascination, her earlier noble peak momentarily forgotten. The magic they describe is a form of elemental warding. It's incredibly complex. Her expertise, dismissed by her family, was finally relevant. A small, almost imperceptible spark of pride ignited within her. Can you read them? Naruto asked, his voice gentle. Some of them, she admitted. They speak of trials to test the worthiness of those who enter. Illusions, guardians, and a final judgment. So, traps, Luck chirped, his grin widening. My favorite. He took the lead, practically skipping into the oppressive darkness. His magical senses were a living radar, his head twitching left and right. Trap. Mana siphon sigil on the floor, 50 feet ahead. Don't step on the blue tiles. They navigated a long corridor. Luck cheerfully pointing out pressure plates that triggered poison darts, runes that would drain a mage's mana dry, and ceiling tiles enchanted to fall. Asta, with his anti-magic sword, proved to be an invaluable tool, tapping certain magical traps and causing them to fizzle into inert stone and dust. Naruto, meanwhile, used his clones to test pathways, create diversions for magical sensors, and even form a bridge over a chasm when Luck declared the existing one to be a complex illusion designed to dump them into a pit of magical beasts. Their teamwork, while chaotic, was surprisingly effective. Luck would sense the danger, Naruto would analyze it and devise a solution, and Asta would provide the brute force negation when needed. Even Noelle found her role. In a chamber where the walls began to close in, she instinctively cast a spell. Sea Dragon's Nest. A protective sphere of swirling water erupted around them. It was unstable, wobbling precariously, but it was just strong enough to brace against the crushing walls, buying them the precious seconds Naruto needed for a clone to find and jam the mechanism. It was the first time she had cast a defensive spell that had worked exactly as intended. The look of shocked success on her face was a victory in itself. Nice one, Noelle, Asta cheered. I wasn't trying to help you imbeciles. She stammered, her face flushing crimson. I was simply protecting myself. But the small, proud smile she tried to hide did not go unnoticed by Naruto. They finally reached a vast, circular chamber. In the center stood their first true obstacle, a 10-foot-tall golem made of the same black stone as the temple, its body crisscrossed with glowing blue runes. It had no face, only a single, pulsing crystal in its chest that radiated immense magical power. Ooh, a big one. Luck giggled, his hands already crackling with lightning. He zipped forward and unleashed a barrage of lightning bolts that simply sparked harmlessly off the golem's enchanted hide. My turn, Asta roared, charging in with his sword. He swung his massive blade, and the clang of anti-magic meeting enchanted stone echoed through the chamber. The golem staggered back, a deep gouge carved into its arm. It works, Asta yelled. Physical attacks and anti-magic are the key. The golem responded, its massive stone fist slamming down with incredible force. Asta was agile, but the sheer area of impact forced him back. The golem then opened its chest cavity, and the crystal within began to glow ominously. Get back, Naruto shouted. A beam of pure, concussive magical energy shot from the crystal, carving a deep trench in the floor where Asta had been standing. Okay, new plan, Naruto said, creating 20 shadow clones. Luck, you're the distraction. Stay fast, stay mobile. Asta, you're our sword. Wait for my signal. Noelle, can you obscure its vision? Obscure its what? She asked, confused. Make it hard for it to see. Naruto clarified. A fog, a mist, anything. It was a simple request, a task that didn't require pinpoint control. Noelle focused, and a thick, swirling mist began to emanate from the ground, quickly filling the chamber and muffling the glow of the runes. The golem paused, its crystal eyes sweeping back and forth, trying to find a target. Now, Naruto commanded. His clones burst from the mist from all sides, a wave of orange and black. They swarmed the golem, leaping onto its legs and arms, not to damage it, but simply to hold it, to weigh it down. The golem thrashed, shaking them off, but for every one it smashed, 2 more would take its place. Luck, Naruto yelled. The lightning mage, a grinning blur in the mist, zipped past the golem's head, unleashing a bright flash of lightning right in front of its crystal eye. momentarily dazzling it. It was the opening Asta needed. He burst through the mist, his sword held high. Asta, now! Naruto's voice roared, a perfect echo of a command he'd given 1,000 times to Sasuke. Asta leapt, using one of Naruto's clones as a springboard to gain extra height, and brought his sword down in a devastating two-handed arc. The anti-magic blade slammed directly into the glowing crystal in the golem's chest. There was a sickening crunch, followed by a high-pitched whine. The blue light in the crystal flickered and died. The runes covering the golem's body went dark. For a moment, it stood motionless, and then it crumbled, collapsing into a pile of lifeless black rock. All right, we did it, Asta cheered, raising his sword in triumph. Their celebration was cut short. A slow, mocking clap echoed from the far side of the chamber, where a previously hidden doorway now stood open. Standing in the entrance was a contingent of mages in the sterile, gray uniforms of the Diamond Kingdom. Leading them was a young man with white hair and a cold, impassive face. Half of his face was covered in a crystalline structure, and he wore the uniform of a high-ranking officer. His mana was immense, cold and sharp as a diamond shard. Impressive, the man said, his voice devoid of emotion. You defeated the temple's guardian. You have my gratitude for clearing the path. This was Mars, one of the Diamond Kingdom's 8 shining generals. Who the hell are you? Asta demanded, pointing his sword at them. We are the rightful inheritors of this temple's power, Mars stated, ignoring Asta. He held out his hand, and his grimoire floated open. Diamond creation magic. Talos doll. The ground shimmered, and a dozen soldiers made of pure, razor-sharp diamond rose from the floor. Their movements perfectly synchronized. Take care of the Clover Kingdom trash, Mars commanded his own mages. The boy with the sword is mine. He encased himself in a suit of shimmering diamond armor and created a massive diamond broadsword. The chamber erupted into chaos. Luck, laughing maniacally, engaged the diamond mages, his lightning a chaotic dance against their rigid, earth-based spells. Noel, seeing Asta about to be overwhelmed by the diamond clones, acted on pure instinct. She created a swirling vortex of water, not to attack, but to intercept them, the force of the water slowing the relentless advance of the diamond soldiers. Naruto moved. He wasn't aiming for the fodder. He was aiming for the head. He appeared in a flicker of movement between Asta and Mars. Your fight's with me, Naruto said, his voice low and dangerous. Mars' eyes, cold and analytical, focused on Naruto. Your mana is an anomaly. You will be an interesting specimen to dissect. He swung his diamond sword. Naruto ducked under the blow, the wind from the massive blade rustling his hair. He countered with a kick to Mars' side, the impact ringing out like a hammer striking an anvil. The diamond armor held, but Mars slid back several feet. You're fast, Mars noted, a flicker of surprise in his voice. He stomped his foot, and jagged diamond spikes erupted from the ground, forcing Naruto to leap back. This was a different level of power from the bandits or the exam candidates. Mars was a true weapon, his magic versatile and deadly. He could create soldiers, armor, weapons, and environmental traps in the blink of an eye. Naruto created a Rasengan. He needed to end this quickly. He shot forward, weaving through a volley of diamond shards, and thrust the sphere towards Mars' chest. Diamond magic. Levadine. Quote. A second, more intricate suit of armor formed over Mars' existing one, studded with sharp protrusions. The Rasengan hit it and ground against its surface, diamond cracking and groaning under the strain but ultimately holding. The force of the impact, however, sent Mars hurtling backward, smashing through the chamber wall. He stopped a Rasengan, Naruto thought, surprised. His technique had never been blocked so directly. From the hole in the wall, Mars emerged, his armor already repairing itself. My master's magic is absolute. Your crude attacks are useless. Behind him, Naruto could see a vast, glittering chamber. The treasure room. It was filled not with gold, but with ancient magical artifacts, glowing scrolls, and a central dais upon which rested a single, ornate sword. So that's what you're after, Naruto said. The knowledge and power in this room will ensure the Diamond Kingdom's supremacy, Mars stated flatly. He summoned 2 massive diamond golems, replicas of his own form. They will keep your friends busy. You and I will finish this. The 2 new golems engaged Asta and Luck, their immense power forcing the two black bulls onto the defensive. Noelle, seeing them struggle, tried to help, but a stray diamond shard sliced her arm, and she cried out in pain, her concentration breaking. Naruto saw it all. His friends were in trouble. This cold, emotionless general was about to take everything. Something inside him snapped. The casual, easygoing demeanor fell away, replaced by the cold fury of a warrior who had seen too many comrades fall. "You want to finish this?" Naruto said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Fine." He created two shadow clones. They stood on either side of him, and all three held out their hands. An incredible amount of energy began to gather in the original's palm, far more than a normal Rasengan. The two clones helped him shape it, compress it, their own energy pouring into the attack. The sphere of grinding chakra and mana grew, swelling to the size of a beach ball, its roar filling the chamber. Odama Rasengan. Great Ball Rasengan. Mars' impassive expression finally broke. The sheer density of the power confronting him was beyond anything he had anticipated. He crossed his arms, summoning every last bit of his magic into a final, desperate defense. Diamond Magic. Titan's heavy armor. A thick, multi-layered shell of diamond, 10 feet thick, enveloped him. Naruto charged. He didn't just run. He moved with the force of a tidal wave, the massive Rasengan leading the way. "Get out of my way." The Odama Rasengan met the Titan's heavy armor. For a moment, there was only a blinding white light and a deafening, grinding roar. Then, the diamond shattered. Not cracked, not broke, but disintegrated. It was utterly and completely annihilated. The Rasengan, barely diminished, slammed into Mars' body. The shining general was thrown from the dungeon like a stone from a catapult. He shot out of the entrance, across the beach, and skipped across the surface of the ocean before sinking into the gray waves, defeated and unconscious. The treasure room was silent. Mars' diamond soldiers and golems crumbled into dust, their master's magic gone. Asta, Luck, and Noelle stared at the gaping, smoking hole in the wall, then at Naruto, who stood panting slightly, the saint of the immense power dissipating from his hand. He had just defeated one of the most powerful mages of a rival nation with a single, overwhelming attack. "Whoa," was all Asta could manage to say. Naruto didn't bask in the victory. He immediately went to Noelle, his expression shifting to one of concern. "Are you okay?" He quickly tore a strip from his jacket and began to expertly dress the wound on her arm. I'm fine," she stammered, her face a confused mess of pain, shock, and a strange, unfamiliar warmth at his concern. "You didn't have to. We're a team," he said simply, tying off the bandage. "We look out for each other." With the immediate threat gone, they turned their attention to the treasure room. While Luck and Asta excitedly examined the magical weapons, Noelle found hers. Drawn to a stone tablet covered in the same ancient runes as the entrance. "Naruto, come look at this," she called out, her voice trembling slightly. He walked over, and she began to translate. It speaks of a time before the kingdoms, a time of a great war between humanity and another race, a race with immense magical power, blessed by mana itself. "The elves." "Elves?" Naruto asked. "But that's not all," she continued, her finger tracing a particular set of runes. "It speaks of a forbidden magic, a power that could bridge worlds and rewrite the laws of mana. It speaks of a grimoire that was not of this world, a catalyst for that power. A grimoire, with 6 leaves." She looked up at him, her violet eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying understanding. "It's talking about your grimoire. It says it doesn't choose a master from this world, but is drawn to one who falls into it, a soul of Golden Sun and Crimson Storm." Naruto placed a hand on the grimoire at his back. It was warm, pulsing with a faint, knowing energy. He wasn't just a visitor here. His arrival, his very existence, was tied to the deepest, most ancient secrets of this world. Their first mission was over. They secured the dungeon and defeated a powerful enemy. But they had left with something far heavier than treasure. They had left with a piece of a puzzle, a prophecy that placed Naruto at the very center of a conflict he was only just beginning to understand. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. Merit and a Prophecy's Weight. The trek back from the sunken temple was a stark contrast to their tense, cautious entry. The air, no longer humming with the temple's ancient and malevolent power, felt clean and crisp. Luck was uncharacteristically quiet, occasionally glancing at Naruto with an expression of profound respect that was far more unsettling than his usual battle-crazed grin. Asta, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of energy, replaying the entire battle in excruciating detail, his voice echoing off the seaside cliffs. Naruto walked alongside Noelle, who had insisted on walking on her own despite the wound on her arm. She was silent, her gaze fixed on the gray waves, but it was a heavy, thoughtful silence. The weight of the prophecy she had translated seemed to hang in the air between them. A grimoire from another world. A soul of golden sun and crimson storm. It was the stuff of myths, yet the proof was walking right beside her. "Are you sure you're okay?" Naruto asked, his voice soft, cutting through the sound of Asta's triumphant shouting. "We can rest if you need to. I am a royal of the House of Silva," she replied automatically, her voice stiff. "A scratch like this is nothing." But the words lacked their usual conviction. She chanced a glance at him, at his calm blue eyes that held no pity, only genuine concern. She looked away quickly, a faint blush on her cheeks. The words on that tablet. Do you understand what they mean?" "They mean my life just got a lot more complicated," he said with a wry smile. "But it's nothing I can't handle." His simple confidence was both infuriating and deeply reassuring. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't overwhelmed. He accepted this shattering revelation as if it were just another mission parameter. It made the fear coiling in her own stomach feel manageable. Their return to the Black Bull's hideout was met with the squad's typical brand of chaotic indifference. Vanessa was napping on the couch, Charmy was having a celebratory lunch for their safe return, and Ghosh was polishing a new frame for a picture of his sister. "You're back," Yami grunted from his usual spot, not even looking up from his newspaper. "You didn't die. Did you bring me anything shiny?" Asta, practically bursting with pride, dumped a sack full of the less important magical artifacts they'd recovered onto the floor. "We explored the whole dungeon, Captain. And we fought a shining general from the Diamond Kingdom. A guy named Mars. Naruto took him out with one giant Rasengan." The newspaper in Yami's hands was slowly lowered, his dark, piercing eyes fixed on them. The lazy, bored aura around him sharpened into something far more intense. "You fought a shining general. He was trying to steal the treasure," Luck added cheerfully. "He made these cool diamond puppets. I wanted to fight him more, but Naruto blew him all the way across the ocean." Yami stood up. He walked over to the pile of artifacts, nudged a glowing orb with his foot, and then looked at his 4 squad members. He looked at the new confidence in Asta, the respectful awe in Luck, the fragile, budding pride in Noelle, and the unshakable calm in Naruto. "Good job," he said. The 2 words, delivered in his gruff monotone, were the highest praise any of them had ever heard him give. He then picked up a jewel-encrusted dagger from the pile, admired it for a second, and tucked it into his belt. "The rest is junk. The Wizard King will want a full report. Naruto, you're with me. The rest of you, go clean up or whatever." As Yami and Naruto left for the capital, the news of their mission began to ripple through the hideout. For the first time, the other members looked at their newest recruits. Especially the orange-clad Enigma, not just as rookies, but as bulls who had already proven their strength and earned their place. The audience with the Wizard King was a private affair. It was just Julius, Yami, and Naruto in the same grand chamber as before. Julius Novachrono had read the initial field report, and his usual cheerful demeanor was amplified into one of pure, unrestrained excitement. A complete runic history of the war with the elves. Tangible proof of their existence. He exclaimed, pacing the room, his eyes sparkling. And a detailed account of primordial warding magic. "This is the most significant historical find in a century. And you say Noelle Silva was able to translate it? Wonderful. Her academic potential is finally being put to good use." He then stopped and looked at Naruto, his smile softening into an expression of intense curiosity. "But the most fascinating part of the report is, of course, you. To defeat a shining general, one who was augmented with magical experiments no less. Yami, it seems your gamble on the outcasts is paying off spectacularly." "They're a bunch of idiots," Yami grunted, "but they're my idiots. The kid's strong. That's all there is to it. It's more than strength," Julius said, his gaze becoming sharper, more analytical. Your report mentions a prophecy. A 6-leaf grimoire belonging to a soul from another world. Tell me, Naruto Uzumaki, what do you remember before you arrived here? Naruto hesitated for a fraction of a second. A battle, he said, his voice steady. A big one. I threw everything I had into one last attack. When I woke up, I was in the forest near Hage. And your powers are not derived from the mana of this world, are they? Julius pressed gently. They are your own, ample. Affied by your grimoire and the ambient mana around us. A perfect fusion. An impossible existence. The Wizard King wasn't just a magic fanatic, he was a genius. He had pieced together the truth from a handful of reports and his own observations. Your secret is safe with me, Julius said, sensing Naruto's reticence. But understand this, your arrival was not a random accident. The magic described on those tablets. The power to bridge worlds, it is a power that many would kill to obtain. The Eye of the Midnight Sun, the Diamond Kingdom, you are now a player in a game you did not ask to join, and your very existence is the prize. The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. So what's the plan? Naruto asked, cutting straight to the point. Julius smiled, his respect for the young man growing. For now, you continue as you are. Grow stronger. Build bonds with your squad. You are a magic knight of the Clover Kingdom. And we protect our own. But be vigilant. Your victory against Mars has put a target on the back of every member of the Black Bulls. Later that evening, back at the hideout, a celebratory feast was in full swing. Magna and Luck had started a contest to see who could eat the most fire-breathing peppers. Vanessa was trying to coax Naruto into a drinking game, and Asta was loudly proclaiming his new workout regimen to anyone who would listen. Naruto slipped away from the chaos, seeking a moment of quiet. He found himself on the crooked, tiled roof of the base, looking up at the unfamiliar constellations in the night sky. He felt a presence behind him and turned to see Noelle, tentatively making her way towards him, a plate of food in her hands. I thought, you might be hungry, she said, avoiding his gaze, holding out the plate. Charmy insisted. Thanks, he said, accepting it with a smile. They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the party below a distant, cheerful roar. The Wizard King, did you tell him about the prophecy? She asked quietly. He already knew, Naruto replied. Or he'd figured it out. He's smarter than he looks. So it's true, she breathed, hugging her knees to her chest. All of it. You're really not from here. Nope, he said, taking a bite of roasted meat. I'm from a place called Konoha. We have villages, not kingdoms. And we use something called chakra, not mana. It's different. He spoke of his home, not with sadness, but with a simple, matter-of-fact nostalgia. He told her about being an orphan, about his dream of becoming his village's leader, about his friends, his team. He didn't tell her about the war, or the godlike beings he'd fought. He just told her about the boy he had been. And Noelle listened. For the first time, she saw him not as a mysterious powerhouse or a kind-hearted commoner, but as someone who was, in his own way, as lost and alone as she was. He was a foreigner in a strange land, just as she was an outcast in her own family. It must be difficult, she said, her voice barely a whisper. To be so far from home. Naruto looked up at the stars. I miss it, he admitted. I miss my friends. But this place isn't so bad. I've got a new team. A new family, I guess. It's chaotic, and everyone's a little crazy. But they're good people. He turned and looked at her, his blue eyes clear and honest in the moonlight. And that includes you, Noelle. Her heart skipped a beat. Her face felt hot. She quickly looked away, her silver hair hiding her blush. Don't be ridiculous. I am royalty. I am nothing like those other animals. Naruto just chuckled. Whatever you say, Your Highness. A comfortable silence fell between them again. The prophecy, she said, her voice serious again. It called you a soul of Golden Sun and Crimson Storm. When you fought Mars, when you used at Giant Sphere, your energy felt like that. Like a storm. But when you helped me with my magic, when you healed my arm, it felt warm. Like the sun. She finally found the courage to look at him. It's a heavy burden, isn't it? To have a destiny like that. A destiny is just a path, Naruto said, finishing his food and setting the plate aside. You can choose to walk it, or you can choose to make your own. He stood up and stretched. Right now, my path is with the Black Bulls. My destiny is to make sure none of my new friends get hurt. It's that simple. He held out a hand to help her up. His hand was warm and calloused. And when her fingers touched his, a strange, pleasant jolt went through her. She let him pull her to her feet, her mind reeling. He wasn't just accepting his fate, he was defining it in the simplest, most noble terms imaginable, protecting his friends. Protecting her. Before she could say anything else, a spatial portal shimmered into existence on the roof next to them. Finral stuck his head out, his expression frantic. Naruto, Captain Yami needs you and Asta. Now, it's the Wizard King. He's issued a merit promotion ceremony at the capital for you guys, and another mission. A serious one. The quiet moment was shattered. The weight of the world, which had seemed so manageable just a second ago, came crashing back down. A promotion was one thing, but a direct, urgent mission from Julius himself. Something was wrong. Naruto looked from Finral's worried face to Noelle's. He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze before letting go. Guess the quiet part's over. He turned and jumped into the portal without a second thought, his orange jacket a flash of color before he vanished. Noelle stood on the rooftop, her hand still tingling, her heart pounding in her chest. The storm was coming, and the golden sun was heading right into the heart of it. And for the first time in her life, she was terrified of what might happen to someone other than herself. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Royal Court and a Stolen Light. The spatial portal ripped open in the Black Bull's chaotic common room, the scent of the capital, stone, magic, and money, washing over the familiar smells of spilled ale and burnt meat. Naruto stepped through, Asta at his heels, his eyes blinking to adjust to the sudden shift. Yami was already waiting, looking impatient. Took you long enough, he grunted. Try to look presentable. The Wizard King is giving you a medal or something. Don't embarrass me. A medal, for real. Asta's eyes went wide, sparkling with the pure, unadulterated joy of a dream taking one small step closer to reality. The merit promotion ceremony was held in a grand hall within the castle, a place of soaring marble columns and banners depicting the crests of the 9 Magic Knight squads. The air was thick with the suffocating formality of the royal court. Dozens of high-ranking nobles and magic knights filled the chamber, their gazes a mixture of curiosity, envy, and outright disdain as the 2 members of the infamous Black Bulls were escorted to the front. Naruto saw Yuno standing with the Golden Dawn. He wore his new rank and squad robe with a quiet, confident pride. He had also been promoted for his own exemplary work, and he gave Naruto and Asta a subtle nod of acknowledgement, a silent affirmation of their shared journey from the outskirts of the kingdom to its very heart. Julius Novachrono stood before the assembled crowd, his smile as warm and genuine as ever, yet today it carried the weight of officialdom. He recounted their mission in the sunken temple, his voice magically amplified to fill the hall. He spoke of their courage, their teamwork, and their victory over a Diamond Kingdom general. When he called Asta's name to award him the rank of Junior Magic Knight, 3rd class, a wave of incredulous murmuring swept through the noble contingent. The magic-less boy, promoted. This is an insult to the very institution of the Magic Knights. Asta stood tall, refusing to let their scorn diminish his moment. He accepted his medal with a fierce, teary-eyed pride. Then Julius called Naruto's name. For his exceptional tactical judgment, overwhelming power, and for securing a vital victory for the Clover Kingdom, I award Naruto Uzumaki the rank of Intermediate Magic Knight, 1st class. A stunned silence fell over the hall. It was an unprecedented promotion for a rookie. Leaping over multiple ranks, to go from an unknown to a rank higher than most veteran knights in a single mission was unheard of. Wizard King, you cannot be serious. Nozzle Silva's cold voice cut through the silence. He stepped forward, his silver braid seeming to glisten with indignation. This foreigner has an unknown, unclassified magic. His grimoire is a blasphemy against the natural order. To grant him such a high rank is to invite chaos and instability into our ranks. Before Julius could respond, a lazy, powerful voice drawled from the side of the room. Are you scared, Nozzle? Marioliona Vermilion stood with her arms crossed, leaning against a column as if she owned it. She hadn't been on the main dais, preferring the shadows, but her presence was a palpable force of nature. Are you scared that a foreigner with real power might make your carefully constructed system of breeding and prestige look like the hollow sham it is?" She continued, her golden eyes fixed on Nozzle. "I saw him fight. He has more grit and a better head on his shoulders than half the pampered peacocks in your squad. He earned that rank. Or are you saying the Wizard King's judgment is flawed?" Nozzle's face tightened, a muscle twitching in his jaw. To argue further would be to question Julius directly, a line even he would not cross so publicly. He shot Naruto a look of pure loathing before melting back into the crowd. Naruto caught Marioleona's eye and gave her a grateful grin. She responded with a barely perceptible nod, the corner of her mouth twitching in what might have been a smile. He saw Noelle then, standing with her siblings, Solid and Nebra. She was trying to make herself small, to disappear under their contemptuous glares. "Look, Nebra," Solid sneered, his voice a mocking whisper that carried in the quiet hall. "Our little failure is here, representing the dregs of the Magic Knights." How utterly humiliating. She probably spent the whole mission hiding and crying. Noelle flinched as if struck. Naruto felt a flash of hot anger. He stepped forward to receive his medal from Julius, and as he did, he spoke, his voice calm but carrying a clear, sharp edge that cut directly towards the Silva siblings. "That's funny," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Because from what I saw, Noelle was the one who deciphered the ancient magic that baffled everyone else. And her sea dragon's nest was the only thing that stopped us from being crushed flat. I guess some people are just too busy polishing their own egos to recognize real talent when they see it." Solid and Nebra's sneers froze on their faces, their cheeks flushing with anger and embarrassment at being so publicly countered. Noelle's head snapped up, her violet eyes wide with shock. He had defended her, not with a shout or a challenge, but with a simple, undeniable statement of fact that elevated her while simultaneously dismissing her siblings as irrelevant. After the ceremony concluded, Julius dismissed the court, but asked Naruto, Asta, and Yami to remain. They were joined by a tall, bespectacled young man in a golden dawn robe, Klaus lunettes, and a young woman whose gentle presence was a stark contrast to the military stiffness of the others. She had soft orange hair and kind eyes, and a vermilion family crest was visible on her robe. This was Mimosa Vermilion. "Thank you for that display, Naruto," Julius said once they were alone, his smile returning. "A little disruption to the status quo is always healthy. But I'm afraid the ceremony was merely a pretense. We have a more pressing matter." His expression grew serious. "Over the past 2 weeks, 3 mages have been kidnapped from within the capital. All of them possess rare, non-combative magic attributes, memory alteration, long-range communication, and advanced healing. They were taken without a single sign of forced entry or struggle. The latest victim was a member of the Golden Dawn, taken from her own quarters 2 nights ago. An inside job," Yami grunted. "Precisely," Julius agreed. "The kidnapper uses a subtle, insidious form of magic, likely something that incapacitates without a fight. I'm forming a joint squad to investigate this discreetly. Klaus, Mimosa, you will represent the Golden Dawn. Asta, Naruto, you will represent the Black Bulls." Klaus pushed his glasses up his nose, looking at Asta with unconcealed skepticism. "Sir, with all due respect, taking a magic-less peasant on a mission that requires subtle investigation. Asta's anti-magic may be the only thing that can detect the residue of this unknown spell," Julius countered gently. "And Naruto's methods," he said, his eyes twinkling, "are anything but conventional. That is precisely why I need you both. My plant magic will allow me to track any residual mana trails," Mimosa added, her voice soft but confident. She offered Naruto and Asta a kind, welcoming smile. "It is an honor to work with you both." Their investigation began in the lavish, empty room of the latest victim. Klaus immediately began a by-the-book analysis of the mana signatures in the room, finding nothing out of the ordinary. Asta swung his sword around, hoping to feel a pull, but the room was clean. Naruto ignored all of that. He closed his eyes, his shinobi senses taking over. He smelled the faint, lingering scent of a particular type of night-blooming flower that didn't grow in this part of the capital. He saw the almost invisible scuff mark on the windowsill, not from a boot, but from the polished heel of a dress shoe. He created a dozen clones and sent them out, transformed into castle servants and guards, to discreetly ask questions and listen to gossip. This is pointless, Klaus sighed, exasperated by Naruto's stillness. We need to follow procedure. Procedure isn't working, Naruto said, opening his eyes. His clones had returned, their information flooding his mind. The kidnapper attended the Royal Knights Gala 2 nights ago. He was wearing a night bloom in his lapel. And he's going to be at the Marquis de Saint Denis's masquerade ball tonight. Klaus and Mimosa stared at him, stunned by the sheer volume and specificity of his information. How could you possibly know that? Klaus demanded. I have my methods, Naruto said with a grin. Our target isn't some brute. He's a high-ranking noble, moving in plain sight. That evening, they found themselves dressed in formal attire, masks in hand, preparing to infiltrate one of the most exclusive social events of the year. Vanessa had Ken a perverse delight in lending Naruto a finely tailored black suit, which fit him with a startling elegance that was a far cry from his usual orange jacket. My, she had purred, adjusting his tie. Clean up pretty well for a ruffian, don't you? The ballroom was a sea of glittering jewels, rustling silk, and false smiles. Naruto's senses were on high alert, filtering through the cacophony of conversations and the overwhelming press of arrogant mana signatures. He moved through the crowd with an easy grace, nodding politely to nobles who would have sneered at him just that morning. He found Mimosa by the fountain, looking lovely but slightly overwhelmed in a green gown. Are you all right? He asked. Oh, Naruto-san, she said, blushing slightly. It's just a lot. I'm not very good at these sorts of events. Me neither, he confessed. But sometimes you have to wear a mask to see what's underneath. He offered her his arm. A dance. It's the best way to survey the room without looking like you are. Mimosa's blush deepened, but she accepted. Naruto led her onto the dance floor, his movements surprisingly fluid and confident. He wasn't a master dancer, but he was a master of mimicry and movement. He made her feel safe and graceful, guiding her through the steps as his eyes scanned the crowd. You're very different from what I expected, she said, her voice soft. Everyone spoke of your overwhelming power. But you're very kind. Across the room, Noelle, who had used her royal status to attend, watched them, a glass of juice clutched so tightly in her hand it was a wonder it didn't shatter. She felt a hot, unfamiliar pang in her chest. It was ugly and sharp, and she hated it. It was jealousy. Naruto felt a shift in the room's atmosphere. A subtle, hypnotic pulse of mana, weaving through the music, making the guests more placid, more suggestible. He followed the source with his senses to a man standing on a balcony, observing the party with a detached air. Marquis Velius. He was their man. Just as Naruto was about to move, the hypnotic pulse intensified. The world seemed to shimmer, the lights of the ballroom elongating and twisting. A powerful illusion settled over them. Naruto found himself back in the Valley of the End, the sky bleeding red. Sasuke stood before him, his eyes cold and filled with a hate that was not his own, a monstrous power radiating from him. You failed, Naruto. The illusion whispered. You failed to save me. You fail everyone you try to protect. For a moment, the old pain, the old guilt, threatened to consume him. But then, a new set of faces flashed in his mind. Asta's determined grin, Noelle's flustered pride, Vanessa's playful wink, Yami's grudging respect. They were his now. They were his to protect. I won't fail them, Naruto said, his voice a low growl. He focused his own energy, not mana, but the pure, indomitable will of his chakra. With a mental roar, he shattered the illusion. The ballroom snapped back into focus. He saw Klaus on his knees, sweating, Mimosa looking faint, and Asta clutching his head, his anti-magic sword glowing faintly as it fought the spell. Naruto was already moving. He appeared on the balcony in a flicker, standing between the Marquis and his next target, a young girl with sound magic. Party's over, Naruto said. Marquis Velius didn't flinch. You broke my lullaby of the court. Impossible. Your mind should be shattered by your own regrets. My regrets don't own me, Naruto said. They just remind me what I'm fighting for. Velius sneered, and the illusion shifted again, becoming personal. Focused entirely on Naruto. The air grew cold, and the specter of Kagaya Otsutsuki rose behind the Marquis, her Rinne Sharingan boring into his soul. You cannot fight a god, the illusion hissed. Naruto didn't even blink. He walked forward, straight through the terrifying visage of his old enemy. I've already beaten her once. He didn't form a Rasengan. He didn't use a clone. He simply drew back his fist, channeling a precise, controlled burst of his hybrid energy into his knuckles. He wasn't trying to destroy the Marquis, he was trying to disrupt the delicate flow of man. Required for such a complex mental spell. His punch was a silent, surgical strike. It connected with the Marquis's jaw, and the intricate illusion that had blanketed the entire ballroom shattered like glass. Velius's eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed, his mind overloaded and shut down by the invasive energy. As the other magic knights stormed the balcony, Naruto looked down at the unconscious Marquis. It had been a victory of will and control, not just brute force. Later, as Velius was being taken away, he stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at Naruto, a strange, lucid clarity in his gaze. "You think I act alone?" he whispered, a faint, fanatical smile on his lips. "I am merely a gardener, pruning the dead weight. The true cleansing is yet to come. The ones who walk in the light, the true patriots of this kingdom, they cast the darkest shadows." The words sent a chill down Naruto's spine. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a conspiracy that ran to the very heart of the Clover Kingdom. He returned to find his temporary squad waiting. Asta was fired up. Klaus looked at him with a new, grudging respect, and Mimosa's gaze was full of open admiration. "Your methods are unorthodox," Klaus admitted, pushing up his glasses. "But effective. I apologize for my earlier judgment." He held out a hand. Naruto shook it firmly. When he finally returned to the Black Bull's base, exhausted, he found Noelle waiting in the common room, pretending to read a book. "So," she said, not looking up, "I heard you had a busy night." "Dancing with my cousin." Naruto grinned, a tired but genuine smile. "Just part of the mission. She's nice. She's a naive, clumsy girl who happens to be good at one thing," Noelle sniffed, finally looking at him, her cheeks slightly pink. Did you find the kidnapper?" "We did," he said, sinking onto the couch opposite her. "And are you all right?" The question was quiet, almost lost in the crackle of the fireplace. He looked at her, at the genuine, poorly hidden concern in her eyes, and felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "Yeah," he said, "I'm all right." The mission was a success, but the victory felt hollow. A shadow had been revealed, a poison running through the veins of the kingdom. And as he sat there, in the quiet company of a girl who was slowly becoming his friend, Naruto knew that his simple destiny of protecting his comrades was about to get a whole lot more complicated. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. Shadows of the Sun and a Coming Storm. The capture of Marquis Velius did not bring a sense of victory to the capital. It brought a chilling, unspoken tension. The rescued mages were returned, their minds thankfully intact, but the conspiracy Velius had hinted at, a patriotic cleansing, a shad outcast by the light, lingered in the halls of power like a poison gas. Julius Novachrono had doubled the patrols and initiated a deep, covert investigation, but it was like searching for a specific grain of sand on an endless beach. The enemy was not a foreign army or a terrorist group hiding in the Forsaken Realm, they were inside the walls, wearing the faces of allies. For Naruto, life at the Black Bull's hideout settled into a new, comfortable rhythm. He had become an unofficial big brother to the squad's younger members and a respected, if unpredictable, powerhouse to the veterans. He sparred with luck, helping the lightning mage develop tactics beyond, charge straight ahead. He helped Magna refine his fire magic, teaching him principles of control and compression that allowed him to form fireballs that were smaller but far more explosive. He even managed to have a semi-normal conversation with Gordon Agrippa, the quiet curse magic user, discovering a shared appreciation for surprisingly complex tea blends. His most significant impact, however, was on Asta and Noelle. He trained with Asta daily, not teaching him magic, but pushing his physical limits to an inhuman degree. He taught him about Ki, the natural life force Yami had mentioned, helping Asta sharpen his senses to the point where he could anticipate an opponent's move a fraction of a second before it happened. As molding the boy's raw strength and tenacity into the disciplined skill of a true warrior. With Noelle, his approach was different. He didn't train her, he encouraged her. He would find her practicing by the lake, her frustration mounting as her powerful water magic lashed out uncontrollably. He wouldn't offer solutions. Instead, he'd sit with her, talk to her, and distract her. He'd tell her stories about his own failures, about the years it took him to master the Rasengan, about the ridicule he'd faced his entire life. Power isn't about control, Noelle, he told her one afternoon, as she sat dejectedly on the shore after accidentally flooding a small section of the forest. It's about conviction. You're trying to force your magic to obey. But it's a part of you. You don't need to command it. You just need to trust it. Trust yourself. His words, so simple yet so profound, began to chip away at the walls of insecurity and self-loathing her family had built around her heart. She started to see her magic not as a curse or a failure, but as an extension of her own powerful, untamed spirit. One evening, Marioliona Vermilion appeared at their base unannounced. She didn't use the door. She simply strode out of the forest, her mana radiating a heat that made the very air shimmer, and pointed a single, imperious finger at Naruto. You, me, spar, now. The entire squad gathered to watch. This wasn't a training exercise. It was a clash of titans. They stood in a wide, cleared field, the setting sun casting long shadows. No holding back, Marioliona said, a feral grin stretching across her face as she slipped out of her captain's robe. Her fists began to glow with an incandescent orange light. Wouldn't dream of it, Naruto replied, his own grin matching hers. He settled into his familiar fighting stance. What followed was not a battle of spells, but a symphony of pure, unadulterated combat. Marioliona was a physical force of nature, her every punch and kick wreathed in explosive fire. She didn't just cast spells, she weaponized her own body, becoming a living inferno. Her movements were brutally efficient, honed by years of fighting in the wild, untamed mana zones of the kingdom. Naruto met her head-on. He didn't use a Rasengan or a Rasenshuriken. He used taijutsu, augmented by the raw, potent energy of his grimoire. He was a whirlwind of motion, his speed and agility a perfect counter to her overwhelming force. Their fists and feet met in a series of concussive booms that shook the ground. Fire met wind. A lioness met a fox. She would unleash her calatus brachium, a barrage of flaming punches. And he would weave through them, his movements so fluid they seemed to defy physics, countering with precise strikes aimed at her joints and pressure points. He created clones, not to overwhelm her, but to create openings, to force her to divide her attention, a classic shinobi tactic that she met with a massive, 360-degree blast of fire that incinerated them all. You are more than just a beast of power, she panted, a trickle of blood running from her lip, her eyes blazing with an exhilarating mix of fury and respect. You are a hunter. Takes one to know one, he shot back, his knuckles raw. His jacket singed. The fight ended in a draw when Yami, sighing that they were destroying his favorite napping spot, encased them both in a sphere of darkness and told them to knock it off. They emerged, bruised, panting, and grinning at each other like two wolves who had finally found a worthy rival. You're strong, Naruto Uzumaki, Marioliona said, her voice filled with a genuine, hard-won respect. Strong enough to change this kingdom. She looked him dead in the eye. Don't let its rot consume you. The quiet days, however, were numbered. The storm broke on a perfectly clear, sunny afternoon. An emergency summons came from the Wizard King, not via a messenger, but directly, Julius's face appearing in a shimmering portal of time magic before every magic knight captain. The message was terse and grim. The city of Kaiden, a key strategic location on the border with the Diamond Kingdom, was under a full-scale assault. But the attackers were not the Diamond Kingdom's armies. They were a massive, coordinated force from the eye of the Midnight Sun. And they were led by a figure of immense, terrifying power, someone whose mana signature Julius himself had never encountered. Every available magic knight was to be deployed immediately. The Black Bulls, minus Yami who was called to the capital for a captain's meeting, gathered in the common room. The usual chaotic energy replaced by a grim, focused silence. Finral opened a massive spatial portal, the view on the other side a scene of fire, smoke, and screaming. Let's go, Naruto said, his voice calm and steady, a rock in the swirling sea of anxiety. He looked at Asta, Noelle, and the others, his gaze instilling a confidence they didn't know they had. Remember your training. Work together. Protect each other. No one gets left behind. They charged through the portal and into a war zone. The city of Kaidan was burning. Buildings had been turned to rubble, and the streets were filled with terrified civilians fleeing from robed figures in white masks. In the center of the city, a colossal, swirling vortex of negative mana was growing, pulsing like a black, malevolent heart. Their objective was twofold: protect the civilians and stop the vortex. The Black Bulls split up, each member tackling the threats best suited to their abilities. Magna and Luck became a whirlwind of fire and lightning, clearing streets of enemy mages. Gauche used his mirror magic to create an army of duplicates, firing beams of energy from multiple angles. Vanessa's thread magic wove intricate, invisible nets, tripping and ensnaring enemies, subtly altering the fate of their projectiles so they would miss their targets. Naruto, Asta, and Noelle fought as a unit, a well-oiled machine forged in the sunken temple and honed in their training. Naruto would use his clones to engage the main force, his Rasengans carving paths through their ranks. Asta, with his growing ability to read ki, was a black blur. His anti-magic swords a nightmare for the enemy casters. And Noelle was magnificent. She had finally taken Naruto's words to heart. She didn't try to control her power, she unleashed it. Riding on a massive, perfectly formed water dragon, she swept through the city, dousing fires, creating protective barriers for fleeing civilians, and blasting enemies with overwhelming waves of force. She had stopped trying to be a Silva and had finally become herself. But their individual victories were not enough. The vortex in the city center pulsed violently and then erupted. From it emerged the leader of the assault. He was tall, with white hair and golden eyes, and an expression of serene, sorrowful fury. An ethereal, almost divine power rolled off him in waves. He was not human. He was an elf, reincarnated into a human body. This was Licht, the leader of the Eye of the Midnight Sun. The time for judgment is at hand, his voice echoed across the city, filled with an ancient, bottomless grief. You humans, who stole our magic, our lives, our future, you will now pay the price. His grimoire opened, a four-leaf clover that shone with a brilliant, blinding light. Light magic. Divine judgment. Dozens of massive swords made of pure, solidified light formed in the sky above Kaidan. He's going to destroy the entire city. Asta yelled in horror. Before anyone could react, another magical signature, vast and ancient as the world itself, flared to life on the battlefield. William Vengeance, captain of the Golden Dawn, appeared before Licht, his own grimoire open. Licht, William said, his voice strained. This is not the way. Licht looked at the masked captain, and for a moment, his sorrowful expression softened. My oldest friend, he said softly. You and I share a body, a soul, a dream. You know this must be done. The revelation was a thunderclap. William Vengeance and Licht were one and the same. No, Mimosa whispered from a nearby rooftop, her face pale with shock and betrayal. Licht raised his hand. Farewell, William. The swords of light began to descend. But they never reached their targets. A flash of gold, brighter than Licht's own magic, streaked across the sky. Naruto, cloaked in the raw, untamed power of his grimoire, appeared between the swords and the city. The Crimson Storm and the Golden Sun of the prophecy had finally merged. He didn't try to block the swords. He created 1,000 shadow clones, each one forming a Rasengan. It was a scene from the Fourth Great Ninja War, reborn in a world of magic. 1,000 suns to meet a divine judgment. You want to protect your people. Naruto's voice roared, amplified by his immense power, a challenge to the sorrowful god before him. So do I. The Rasengans met the light swords in a cataclysmic explosion that turned the sky white. The force of it flattened buildings for miles around, the shockwave a physical blow that sent everyone, friend and foe alike, tumbling to the ground. When the light cleared, the swords were gone. Naruto hovered in the air, his golden cloak of energy swirling around him, his expression one of grim, unshakable resolve. Licht stared at him, his serene expression finally breaking, replaced by one of utter disbelief. What are you? That power, it is not of this world. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, he declared, his voice echoing with a power that seemed to shake the very foundations of the kingdom. And I'm the one who's going to stop you. He drew back his fist, and behind him, a colossal apparition of golden energy began to form, the head and torso of a great fox with 9 lashing tails. He had no connection to Kurama here, but the grimoire, his own indomitable spirit, and the echoes of his past had given shape to his power, creating a new avatar of the Crimson Storm. The final battle for the fate of the Clover Kingdom had begun. And standing at its center was a boy from another world, a hero who had found a new home to protect, and a new destiny to define. Chapter 10 End.